Good evening. The Historic Preservation Commission meeting of November 19th, 2020 is called to order. Due to the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, the Historic Preservation Commission is being conducted public virtually with no members of the public present. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to practice social distancing. The meeting can be viewed on local cable TV and is being streamed online at the city's website at www.glendaleca.gov. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. That's 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current HPC agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Records of decisions for all projects will be posted online on the Planning Division website. Please note that any appeal of a case heard today must be filed within 15 days of the HPC decision date. The appeal application is also available online. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his or her discretion. May we have roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Vartanian?
Present.
Okay, you just dropped off our video. I'm not sure if something happened.
Nope, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, there you are. Commissioner Vartanian's here. Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Yurka?
Here.
Vice Chair Doom?
He's here, but I think maybe he's...
Vice Chair Doom, please say yes. You can unmute.
Yes, I'm here.
There you are.
Okay, he made his mark. And Chair Crignati?
Present.
Excellent.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, August... Oops. Wrong one. The agenda for the November 19th meeting, regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, was posted on November 16th, 2020 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Approval of Historic Preservation Commission meeting minutes from the August 20th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? I thank you, Mr. Doom, for making that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Doom?
Yeah, we're having a hard time hearing you,
Yeah,
Nick.
try to figure out your mute.
He doesn't appear to be muted, but his mic...
Show is green and it's working.
It's very mute.
Maybe you
It's
have to
very
just get really
soft,
close.
Not mute. Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka?
Yes.
Commissioner Crignati?
Yes.
All right, minutes approved.
Thank you. Oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Glendale Historic Preservation Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. Do we have any oral communications calls? Don't think we do.
We have Sean Bursell on the line. I assume he's speaking on one or both of our items.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Not seeing any oral communications, we'll move on. Do we have any commissioner comments? Anyone?
No.
I'm seeing lots of no's. That's good.
No.
Moving right along. We have no old business. Let's move on to item number 7, new business. Our first item tonight, letter A, is 305 East Randolph Street, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. Do you want me to read all the description, or is that you're going to move on to you guys?
No, that's okay. Eileen's going to give the presentation, but Chair Crignati needs to recuse himself.
Oh, that's right. I have to go.
On this item, he lives within 500 feet of the subject property. That's why I made a point of acknowledging Vice Chair Doom in the intro there. So Vice Chair Doom will serve as our chair for this item. And Eileen Babachani will be presenting the case.
Okay. Are we ready?
I think so.
This is a
Oh,
recommend.
just so let me let me make sure we're ready. Okay, the slideshow is up. Can everyone see the slide? Unfortunately, I can't see you. Could someone just verbalize that the slide is up?
No.
Okay.
No.
Xavier, what do we need to do here? Okay, here are the commissioners. I share over here. I shared in the wrong place.
Down below.
And this one
There you go,
here.
right there.
And then we're sharing
Hit the slide.
here.
Boom.
Now you can see it, right? Thanks for Xavier. Thank you. Okay, Eileen.
This is a recommendation regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources nomination and Mills Act contract for the property located at 305 Randolph Street. Based on a site visit to the property, information on the property obtained from the city record and the nomination and historical documentation submitted by the owner, the property appears to meet the criteria for eligibility to Glendale Register of Historic Resources under Criteria 3. Next. 305 Randolph Street is a rare, unique example of a neoclassical style single-family house in Glendale. It appears to be the oldest residence in the Casa Verdugo neighborhood, as it was featured as an existing residence in a May 1906 publication. Next, please. The house embodies distinctive and exemplary characteristic of its style. It has high artistic value and many notable features, which I will go over the character defining feature in a minute. There have been some alteration, just skip that slide,
Yeah,
please,
sorry.
thank you. There have been some alterations over time, but the house returns a high level of integrity in terms of its material and design. The house has been called a wedding cake house, probably for its form and its applied decorative frieze, and probably for its flat roof. The house is located on a corner lot at the intersection of Randolph and Lewis, within the proposed Casa Verdugo Historic District. The house was built in 1906 by Edson K. Grant and Joshua E. Andrews. The nomination application suggests that the builders might have designed the house to showcase their design skills. The property was owned around 1906 by the Huntington Land and Improvement Company and was transferred to Charles H. Newton family in 1907. The listed resident in the 1911 and 1912 Glendale Directory is William Benedict Kelly. The information in the nomination application states that the street number was changed from 927 Randolph to 305 Randolph around 1922. Since the 1922 directory lists the Kellys living at 927 Randolph, while the 1923 directory lists them at 305 Randolph. The old address number 927 are intact and can be seen under the decorative frieze above the entry porch, but it is painted over. The Kelly family lived in the house for about 43 years, from 1911 to 1954. No information provided in the application suggests that the Newtons, Kellys, or any subsequent owners appear to have made significant contributions to the history of Glendale or the region. The current owner has owned the house since 2018. Going back to the architecture of this house, the design of the house is unique, eclectic, but can be seen as a variation on the neoclassical style. The application and materials prepared for a Glendale Historical Society house tour cite that the influence of the craftsman, mission revival, and also folk Victorian style can be found in this house. Some of the notable character-defining feature of 305 East Randolph Street include flat roof with roof parapet, which is unusual for its style and its time. The roof features attic vent and a parapet with sheet metal coping, partial with porch with ionic columns. and also decorative plaster frieze, which originally wrapped the entire house, but it is now disrupted at a portion of the rear facade. Wood railing at the porch appear to be either original or accurately reconstructed based on historic photograph included in the nomination document. We can move to the next slide, please. Concrete walkway, steps, planter, and low perimeter curb are also character-defining feature. According to the nomination information published in the Glendale News on June 9, 1911, Mr. Kelly, who bought the Newton house, made extensive improvement, putting in sidewalk, curb, etc. Therefore, the concrete walk and curbs might be later addition by the second owner around 1911. Also, iron churns suspended between the concrete piers at the front step are character-defining feature. Next slide, please. The wood entrance door with a beveled glass and leaded glass side lights, and also decorative wood door surrounds, character-defining feature of this house. Next, please. Wood windows are, at this house, are a combination of hung and casement with wood sill and surrounds. It is unusual to have the two mix of the two type of operation, which is casement and hung in this case, especially for having out-swinging casement on the porch. But according to an early photograph, this configuration is original. The side facades of the house on the east and west side feature projecting bay windows. The original bay window at the west facade facing Louis has double hung windows. However, the bay window at the east side is a later addition that features a picture window in the center and divided light metal casement window at the sides. Also narrow wood windows with little glass located on the side of the east bay window, and they appear to be replacement or possibly very early replacement. The exterior wall and columns are clad with non-original rough texture stucco. The smoother stucco on the frieze and column capitals appear to be original. The floor of the porch is not original and was repaired in 2019 to match the pre-existing condition. The ceiling appeared to be original, and concrete urns on several pedestals along the front steps and walkway do not appear to be original, but they are appropriate to the overall character. The rear facade also features a pair of French doors which are not original. The nomination states that the alterations at the rear, north and side facade, which is the east and north facade, including the newer French doors and also removal of decorative plaster frieze and alteration in the area of the bay window, which I mentioned, were due to damage caused by a falling tree on the rear corner of the house in 1980s and 1990s. A pergola on the driveway of Louis Street shown on the early photograph was demolished at an unknown date. The house currently doesn't have any garage. The house returns a high degree of design and material integrity with a few alterations, including the use of rough texture stucco at the wall and the porch column, and some other alterations which are not visible from the street, including the change in the rear bay window, partial loss of the original decorative plaster frieze, and also reconstruction of the rear laundry room and installation of newer rear French door. Staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that the property at 305 East Randolph Street be listed in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and also authorize the city manager to enter into a Milzac contract with the property owner. For the name of the Glendale Register, the house can be called Newton House. However, since the original owners occupied the property briefly, and the second owner, the Kalis family, lived there for over 40 years, staff believes that would be appropriate for the commission to consider Newton Kelly House as the name of this Glendale Register. Also, staff recommends Milzac condition to replace the French doors at the rear facade with new doors more appropriate to the overall appearance of the house. Also, to replace 4 wall lights with new fixture of a design more appropriate to the overall appearance of the house, and replace broken window glass where required and determined by planning staff, and mainly restore the damaged stucco and along the decorative frieze at the north and east facade, which Mr. Platt can explain the details of the staff recommendation.
And it might be more appropriate to talk about this in the discussion with the commissioners, but I just want to introduce the subject. If the commission decides that the frieze is something that should be replaced or recalled as part of a Milzac condition, it opens up some interesting questions in terms of how exactly that would happen. Part of the issue is that we have an existing raised stucco ornamentation that's been heavily covered with paint over the years, so it's lost some of its original detail and crispness. Raising the question, what do we restore? Do we restore the current condition to maintain the appearance? Do we transfer to a mold cast from this after the paint has been removed so we can try to get back to that original condition? Which of course raises the question, is that possible? Probably is. It could require chemical treatment that sometimes, is a hazardous issue. If it's in a limited area, just to cast a mold, that wouldn't be a problem. One other thought is, if you look at the center picture here, and you can see the frieze is intact at the right, and then we have some conduits for the electrical and the rain gutter interfering, but we still have the kind of the secondary cornice element of above the decorative plaster work. What we're missing is the lower wood strip. And one thought would be to kind of just replace that lower wood strip to recall to kind of create the horizontal visual continuity across all the facades, and not necessarily replace the ornamentation, which would be consistent with certain art conservation principles in terms of leaving empty places as what they would call a lacuna. But we also know what was there, so I think it's an interesting subject for the commission to discuss and give us some guidance on if indeed you decide that you want this to be a Milzac condition. So, and Eileen's finished. So,
Yes.
Nick, do you need? Yeah, this would be the time for Nick to ask for questions.
Hey, I hope you can hear me now. I turned my mic up. Is this better?
Not really.
Oh, I get closer. I'll turn my mic up even more.
Closer is good. Yeah.
Closer is
Okay.
good.
Closer is good, but then my ugly mug fills the screen. So that's the way it's going to be, I guess.
The way it goes.
All right. So I guess at this point, I ask for questions from fellow council members.
Commissioner
And I'll
Yerka.
go by, is that right, Jay?
Yes, and it looks like we have a volunteer.
Okay. I don't see any. volunteers. What do you see?
Could you, just before we continue, there's a technical question. Hold on one second. Okay, that's where we didn't quite understand last time. Okay, stop sharing. There. Okay, now the public can see you guys and see Kathy
Oh,
raising
now I
her
see
hand.
Okay, I couldn't see before, Catherine. So, all right, Catherine, let's start with you.
Okay, no worries at all. I just wanted to ask about the proposed condition for the French doors. Was it simply to replace the 2 doors or the windows on the sides of the doors?
It would be the entire unit, and then the
Okay.
configuration, we'd see if that turns into 2 doors or 2 doors with side lights, or, but whatever guidance the commission has is what we would put into the condition, so.
Catherine, any more concerns or questions while we're on you?
Okay.
All
So
right.
that's where, now you can close the public hearing, Commissioner Doom.
Okay. I hereby close the public hearing and move on to individual commission members amongst ourselves, correct?
No, we need to do the public hearing. So we're going to try to bring the property owners and any members of the public who want to comment on this. So this is where Elizabeth needs to turn on her video and make sure we can hear her. And Jeff? There we go, perfect. Seamless.
All right, is it my turn to speak?
Yes, let everyone know what you have to say.
Sure. Well, I have one question immediately, which, you may want to ponder. Do such recommendations have to be carried out before the application would be passed, is one, like the French doors and the frieze and the cleaning of the ionic pillar details? That's one.
Okay, well, I'll answer that, and I'm sorry that wasn't clear before. Any conditions that the conditions that are recommended are based on the work program that you gave us with your Mills Act contract paperwork. And the commission, if they choose to apply any of those conditions or any others that we haven't discussed, they're going to give you a timeline for you to do that. So it would definitely happen after the contract is signed and approved by the city, and a certain amount of time running into several years, most likely, which will be part of the commission's discussion.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, well, if I may take a little time, I'd like to mention that my husband Jeff and I love the historical qualities about this home when we first were introduced to it. We owned a historic style home in the historic district of the Heights in Houston, where I worked for 10 years before we came to California. And with Jeff being British and me being Dutch, given that we each were raised and schooled in Europe, our natural draw is to respecting history and honoring historic value. So with the decision to come here to this lovely house, we felt ahead of time that living in this kind of home would almost morally obligate us to preserving and restoring what we realistically could. This said, it's an expensive hobby, still over time quite enjoyable, of course. It has already cost us plenty since moving in, more than we anticipated, but I'd just like to mention we followed the rules. We have consulted J. Platt where necessary. We have followed the rules without having the status, frankly. Now, as to the city of Glendale, whether these values are consistently pursued and promoted in your council is nothing we pretend we can effectively influence with our application. However, from a business point of view, perhaps I may raise the thought that the land on which this house sits is more valuable than the house itself, especially it being corner property. And no developer would forego an opportunity to snatch it up and put a multi-family structure or an enormous house in its place, unless this property becomes protected. And as a third point on my sheet of paper is that, not knowing the rules of the city, just hearing the recommendation, we personally would support naming the house to the actual first owner, Mr. Newton. You know, reading through all the historical facts of this house, it seemed he is due that kind of honor, I would say, but that's not for us to decide, clearly. And that's basically what we have to say, Jeff, right? Yeah, there is a recommendation in your staff report to restrict the erection of a pergola. May I respectfully request that to perhaps be reconsidered? We want to be mindful of possible zoning issues, but in the absence of a garage to this property and the heat in this part of the country, our vision is for a small pergola that would occupy not quite half of the driveway and have a total size of 17 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 7 feet high, not attached to the house. And this would comfortably leave between 11 and 12 feet distance to the dividing wall with our neighbors on the window. And this is a two-sided argument for me, because looking at the early photograph of this property, where a full-length pergola shows, in erecting a pergola, it would suggest a restoration to the original look. And with our vision to have flowering vine going up the poles, certainly enhances the already romantic quality of this house. So I think that's my bit for tonight.
All right, thank you very much. And now we, Jeff, were you going to say anything?
No, I just fully agree with my wife, who presented it very well. And
Very good.
We're both passionate about the home, but we're also so excited with so many neighbours passing comments every day about how beautiful the home is. So we feel duty bound to maintain the quality of the home and to enhance Glendale. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, we have two people on the line, unless the commissioners have any questions for the applicant. All right, I assume there's a good chance both of these people want to speak on this issue, but we'll verify that. We'll start with Sean Bursell. Are you there, Sean?
Yes, Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Great. Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure to be with the members of the commission again. My name is Sean Bursell. I'm a resident of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but as I think I think all the commission knows, I was formerly a resident of Casa Verdugo for 20 years. I did send an email to the commission yesterday, which I believe Mr. Platt has distributed to you all, and I won't go back through all of that. I also understand that the Casa Verdugo Historic District Commission committee has submitted a letter of support as well. I'm speaking tonight in the strongest support I can possibly express for the designation of 305 East Randolph on the Glendale Register. And I just want to commend Elizabeth and Jeff for their stewardship of this house. They've done a wonderful job. They absolutely love the house. They will remember they were moving in one day, and I was walking my dog by the house, and I just barged up on the porch and introduced myself and started telling them about the house and about the Casa Verdugo neighborhood and everything. And they were absolutely lovely. Most people would have gotten a restraining order against me at that point, but they welcomed me and they welcomed the information that I gave. This is the oldest extant house in Casa Verdugo. It was constructed in 1906 for the Newtons. We know that's absolutely clear. It is the most distinctly designed house in Casa Verdugo. And I say that without undermining any other of the many, many beautiful houses in Casa Verdugo. There's some just incredible houses, but this one, there is nothing else like it in Casa Verdugo. I would submit there is nothing else like it in Glendale, and I'm hard-pressed to think of a similar house that I've seen anywhere. It is, because it is the oldest extant house in Casa Verdugo, which is one of the most important historic neighborhoods of Glendale, that's one of the three neighborhoods that formed what Casa Verdugo, the town of Glendale, and Tropico formed what is now the core of Glendale, and was subsequently expanded by the addition of Montrose. Commissioner Morgan, I see you there, so I acknowledge that. This house is historically and architecturally significant in Glendale, and it deserves to be on the Glendale Register. Just real quickly, those of us in the preservation community, we're a real fun bunch. Sometimes we sit around and say what houses in Glendale that are not on the Glendale Register should be on the register. This house was always at the top of that list whenever we had that conversation. This house should be on the register. The final thing is, I would just say I'm mystified by the entire question of the naming. The Newtons had this house constructed. They were the first owners. There were no significant persons lived in the house subsequent to the Newtons, and the Newtons weren't significant, but they were the first. They constructed it. They were the first owners. Under the normal naming protocol in Glendale, this would be called Newton House. I see no reason why it should not be called Newton House. I pointed out that Elliott House was only owned by the Elliots for 3 years, but it's still called Elliott House. There's another house on the Glendale Register in Casa Verdugo where the owners were maybe 10, 15 years, the original owners. Somebody else, the third owner, lived in the house for 54 years. We did not add that individual's name to that house, nor should we have. I think this should be called Newton House. Thank you very much.
And Sean, can I ask, are you going to stay on the line for the next item also?
I was not planning on that.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure whether I keep you on hold or not. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and our second speaker, I assume Robin Fye would like to join us. So Robin, are you there? Oops. Robin, are you there?
Yes, Jay?
And I assume you want to speak on this application?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay, good. Hi, Jay. Hi, commissioners. It's good to see everybody. I'm going to be much briefer than Sean. I just wanted to say that this is one of the most unique homes in all of Glendale and the oldest home in Casa Verdugo. And it's one of those houses that it's just silly that it isn't already on the register. So on behalf of the Ross Moyne Mountain Homeowners Association, as well as the Casa Verdugo Historic District Committee, and on behalf of everybody in my house, we wholeheartedly support this nomination and hope that you approve it for designation this evening. That's all.
Okay, and same question, Robin. You're not going to speak on the next item, are you?
If I'm able to, I will call back in, Jay. Is that if that's okay?
Of course. Okay, thank you.
Good.
May I thank everybody truly. It's lovely that you're all so supportive. And of course, I don't want to omit thanking the commissioners, Lorna Vartanian and Kathy Yurka, who came on Sunday. And I believe Mr. Morgan came while we were not home because he left a business card. But we very much value the support of all this.
Okay, so Commissioner Vice Chair Doom, if you want to close the public portion of the hearing. And Elizabeth and Jeff, if you put yourselves on mute, please, but stand by. So.
Yeah.
There are no more public communications, and this part of the hearing is hereby closed.
All right, now the commissioner deliberation begins. I'm particularly appreciating the elegance that Commissioner Yurka is bringing to the evening, drinking her sparkling apple cider. So.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
to be partner with my partner who is celebrating with champagne.
Ah,
Ah,
enjoy your celebration.
okay. Is there anyone of our commissioners who wish to speak on this issue? Okay, Catherine? Commissioner Yurka?
Sorry, thank you. I won't always insist on going first, but I have thought quite a bit about this house and about the conditions that were proposed, and I thought it might make sense for me just to proceed right off the bat. First of all, I'm just so excited and honored that this would be my first house to consider for a Glendale Register nomination. This is only my second meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission, and it is just such a wonderful property. I remember touring it as part of the Casa Verdugo home tour several years ago. And thank you for your stewardship, and thank you so much for bringing it forward for consideration. It is self-evidently eligible for the Glendale Register, so I fully support placing it on it, and also a Mills Act contract for the property. I gave a lot of thought to the conditions that were proposed by staff, and I know that these are part of the work plan. And I did want to point out, Elizabeth, that there's a distinction between a condition, something that you must do to get the Mills Act, and something that you might seek to do in the future, which may be where the pergola would come in, whatever the zoning problems are. I definitely don't think that we as a commission should make that a requirement that you need to put in the pergola in order to have the house get a Mills Act contract.
If I could just jump, I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in. Elizabeth and Jeff, we need to talk about that at another time. The pergola is not a good idea to pursue. There are a lot of issues there, but we can explain that later. That's all zoning stuff we'll talk about. So
I did, though, I have thought about the conditions involving the frieze and the French doors. I don't really see the need to replace the frieze. I understand that it was there originally, and I'm guessing, although I don't know for sure, that when the tree hit the house, that it ended up being removed. I don't know that reconstructing it is going to make the house more historic. If it is something that you wanted to do, I think that would be, you'd be welcome to pursue it. Again, I don't feel that it needs to be made a condition. I also note that the French doors, when they were added, the bottom line, what Jay called the lower cornice, actually, it's a little awkwardly placed in relation to the French doors. They're a little bit higher probably than they should be, so that if you were to replace it, there would be this kind of funny little jog over those doors. And it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. I also just wanted to say that as far as the French doors go, you know, if I had been adding those when they were added, I probably would be different. The architecture of the house, it is eclectic. And I think even though they're quite modern, I think there's a simplicity to them that really goes with the house. I mean, that the front is very ornate. The decorative frieze is very ornate. But, you know, things like the windows in the rear, they're quite simple. And I actually don't have a problem with the French doors and the windows. Again, if that was something that you wanted to do, that would be okay, but I would not make it a condition. It's, you know, they were not going to make the house more historic by replacing one alteration with an alteration that's slightly more in keeping with the style of the house. So apart from that, I agree with the condition having to do with the lighting. The only other thing I might add is that I noticed that there was paint gone on the porch floor. Aileen mentioned that the floor had been replaced. The application says that only certain boards had been replaced, the ones that most urgently needed replacement. So I would suggest the condition of it looked okay. I just think it needs to be repainted to protect it from the sun. So I would just have a condition involving repainting it, and then it would be repaired as necessary. But I'm really just pretty okay with the house as it is. It's wonderful. So that's all I wanted to say, except for I agree with the naming. I think it should be named was it the Newton House for the first owners? So thank you very much, and I will sign off now.
Nick, we can't hear you.
Oh, all right. Is this better if I get closer?
Yep.
Yes.
Wow. What a difference a foot makes. Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Commissioner Vartanian, would you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to start out by thanking the owners, Elizabeth and Jeff, for bringing the nomination forward, and certainly for your authentic understanding and appreciation of the significance of the home, and your willingness to take on the stewardship of it. Your love and enthusiasm and passion for the home was so clear when I was there on Sunday, and thank you so much for the tour, Elizabeth. Just to follow up on some of Commissioner Yurka's comments, and Jay, I think I have a question.
Okay.
I'm also just curious. On my screen, I'm speaking, but I'm seeing Chair Doom. Okay. So
yeah, you're good on our screen, so.
Okay, good, because mine keeps flipping around to different things. Under the conditions on the staff report, it appears to me that for restoration of the stucco and wood frieze, that would come back to the commission. Is that would there be a report that would be prepared to get an idea? It seems to me like this might be a two-step process that
yeah, unfortunately, at November 19th of 2020, we have to have the Mills Act contract signed and recorded by December 30th. And we already have a city council hearing scheduled for, I'm not going to say it right now, I think this December 8th, but we'll definitely let the Chappelles know. So I don't think, if you do make that a condition, we will need some guidance now so that it can be formalized in the contract. So I left open the idea for discussion, and one of the options I didn't include is what Commissioner Yurka mentioned of not doing anything at all. I didn't go there only because the Chappelles themselves had said they wanted to do this, and we're very used to putting conditions on projects, so.
So I still would like to hear from my colleagues, I guess. My thought would be, I'm certainly not opposed to having the frieze restored. I do understand it is a bit of a project. I'm going to imagine it may be significantly costly, but I have no idea. And so now I'm feeling a little awkward that there is such a tight deadline on figuring this out. I guess we could make it a recommendation and then come back with a report. I mean, what would that look like?
Well, we can't make it, well, let me think. If we could make it a condition, it's a contractual obligation, and the lawyers aren't in the room, so I'll speak for the attorneys and say that I think we have to nail it down while we're here. One way or the other, and we could discuss the various options that I presented in the staff report. I thought that would be a discussion that would be interesting for the commission to have, but if maybe Commissioner Doom can get a sense of where everyone stands, and then we could see if there's a majority inclined to restore it, then we could talk about that in more depth. If people aren't as interested in restoring it, then maybe it's a moot point.
So I did also notice when visiting the property that, yes, it does appear that the current door opening on the east side is higher than the lower corners of the frieze. So I guess we'd need to talk about how that would be addressed. And then just to speak to the restoration itself, in my personal opinion, I feel that the stucco has sort of achieved its patina over the decades. So I would probably do a mold and not try to, figure out or go back to the original condition. So I would be okay with that, certainly. And ideally that would be the ideal for me. That would be the ideal condition, would be to return it to its original condition. But as mentioned, I think there might be some roadblocks, for lack of a better word, to consider along the way. I am okay with naming the house Newton House. I'd like to thank and commend Sean Bursell. You really outdid yourself on this one, in my opinion, but that was some really great research. So thank you for that.
And at the risk of just throwing another wrench into things, the application came into us with the name Kelly House, and part of that was based on some research done by another consultant. There are two issues that do suggest that the Kelly name has some significance besides their long-term ownership, and one of them was raised by Sean Bursell. I didn't actually have this in my head. The Kellys actually subdivided the lot. The reason the house is on a rather small lot today is they subdivided the property to the north, and we believe also to the east. So that obviously had a major change on the physical spatial relationship of the property to the rest of the neighborhood. And then they were also the people who took out the permits for the concrete work at the front of the house, at least, leading up to the stairs, which is, everyone makes changes to a house over the years and they don't necessarily get named. So Sean is completely right, and that's why the staff report errs on the side of Newton House, because that's in complete conformance with our naming policy. But because the nomination came in as the Kelly residence, and we also felt that there may be some reason the commission might want to consider that, it was just put out there. But of course, we'll go whichever way you guys recommend based on Sean's input and anything else. So.
Well, and not to diminish anybody's research, but I think, Jay, we do typically, I think the naming convention as proposed for Newton fits with our typical guidelines for naming.
Yes.
Okay. Then let me just look at my notes. And then I guess the only thought would be, I know it's probably going to be a little difficult. On the north side of the house, there is quite a bit of, and I'm just trying to pull up pictures here myself. I think sorry, the name is escaping me right now. The meters, and then along the east side of the house, there's a water system. If there might be a way, even though we're looking at the back of the house, to maybe screen those a little more elegantly, maybe even with plantings. I don't know what makes sense. But I think I do, of course, wholeheartedly support the nomination. And I'd like to hear from Commissioners Morgan and Doom about the stucco question as well. Thank you.
Morgan.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody ask that question? Can you hear me? It's a beautiful house, and I thank you so much for nominating it. I was on, I think, the same tour that Commissioner Yurka was on for Casa Verdugo, and walking up and seeing all those homes in that little area, it's fantastic. I'm sorry I couldn't make it there on Saturday and Sunday, but I did come by. I've been there before quite a few times, and I did come by on Wednesday to look at the outside of the house, to touch the stucco and the whole bit. I just have a couple quick questions before I render anything. It's like, so the staff is given 4 things that they want to have done, but at the same time, at the end of the report, there is a whole list of stuff. It says extensive repair work has been done to the property around moving in April, May, June. And it says, so it lists a whole bunch of things. So it says remaining windows to be resashed. Has that been done? Or is that something that the staff didn't look at? Or, I mean,
the Chappelles can't speak now because the public hearing is closed unless it's reopened by the chair. But my best guess, and they can nod their heads if I'm saying something correct, I believe they were going to be repairing the existing sash. I don't think they were planning to replace windows. I think resash means just getting the pulleys and the sash cords kind of operational, making sure the windows aren't painted shut. So that's something we generally wouldn't do as a condition. That's kind of a maintenance issue.
So that's okay. So that's just stuff that they intend to have done at a later date, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So when it comes to the freeze, you know, the fact that it is lost because of a tree coming down on it, I think it's part of the history of the house. And I don't think the replacement of it, if they want to go ahead and do it, that would be fine. But I don't think it's a requirement that should be done. And I think you're in this problem where, like it said in the staff report, these things have been painted over 100 years, and the buildup on this paint is just phenomenal. I mean, I went and looked at the front, at the porch, and I have no idea how you would strip all that paint out. And would you end up with the new frieze looking like it was 100 years old painted, or would it look like it was close to being brand new? So my point is, I would just, it had its time. Unfortunately, it's gone now. It's part of the history of the house, and it's not required to be replaced. I would like it to be replaced, but I think it's a fool's errand. I don't think it will. You'll have two different things. I mean, you definitely will do the Secretary of Interior's standard because you'll be able to tell the difference between the old and the new completely. But like I said, I don't think it's required. Like, it would be nice, but not required. As far as the house, I think it should be with the original owners. I'm very much with Sean. And I do want to say, even though he's not here, that was a fantastic little report that he wrote all of the information and stuff. Having done that for other properties, there's a lot of deep diving. And I'm sure Commissioner Yurka knows the same thing. You start going into stuff and it's just like a rabbit hole. It keeps going and going and going. So I would go with the original owners. And I think the other things that the staff report has said, I didn't get to go inside, in the back of the house because the gates were there and the whole bit, and I wasn't going to scale any fences. But so I'll have to, with Commissioner Vartani and Commissioner Yurka, as far as the French doors at the east facade, whatever they think should be done, I will go wholeheartedly with their recommendations because they both seem to have a keen eye on all of this. So as far as that goes, I'm pretty much happy with what the staff has said, and we'll now go to Vice Chairman Dune.
Morgan, and for my observations, I agree with much of what Morgan said. I think it would be a fool's errand, I like that phrase, to update the freeze would give it a different appearance altogether and difficult to go back to the original. And since it came down by an act of nature with the falling of a tree and not destruction or change by a previous owner, that's part of the history of the house as well. And I think we can give an exception to that for that act of nature, Mother Nature, with the tree falling. I'm ambivalent on the French doors. I like the way they look from the pictures that we have seen, and agree with Commissioner Yurka on much of what she agreed. I think it's a great house. I walked by it with a friend growing up there, and she called it the Wedding Cake House years ago. I think it's a great name. I will still call it the Wedding Cake House, but I agree that it should be called the Newton House. Okay, Jay, we don't hear from Commissioner Pagnotti at all on this, do we?
He's not allowed, no.
Okay. So do any of you, three of you, have any more comments to add?
So, yes, I would just like to make a suggestion then that if we're not going to make replacement of the freeze a condition, I do like one of the suggestions that Jay made that would be to at least restore the upper and lower wood bands of the frieze. That would just leave an idea of the fact that, the frieze did exist and decorate, the entire exterior of the home. And then what was that term? You used an art conservation term, Jay.
Lacuna.
The lacuna.
The indicating the missing piece.
So that that falls under the definition of the lacuna, where we would just have the wood bands, but the actual decorative frieze would be missing.
I'm not sure an art conservator would agree that I'm using it 100% correctly, but it's close. So
that would be my suggestion, so that we sort of just still have an idea of the fact that the frieze did really decorate the entire exterior of the home. And we can stay away, now that I think about it, maybe making a mold of a 100-year patina of layers of paint, it probably would not come out very good. But I'm not an expert. So those are my thoughts.
Kathy, you.
I don't strongly object to the idea of the wood boundaries of the frieze, except that I think the frieze is already suggested by the fact that it runs around the house and then it stops. I didn't feel like being back there, I needed a reminder of it. I feel that its presence is still suggested. The other issue is the fact that the doors are just get in the way of where the frieze would be. And so I think it would look odd personally I understand the principle involved, but I think, given that it's not a question of restoring something, whatever that's going to be done is a reconstruction. I feel that leaving it as it is, it just makes the most sense to me.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Jay, I'm guessing that we go now. Any last comments from your perspective, Jay?
We just need decisions on these points. So I take it that everyone approves replacing the light fixtures and fixing broken glass. That seems uncontroversial.
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian did mention possibly screening some of the electrical conduits or the water heater, which I believe is a tankless water heater. Was that correct? Yeah, tankless water heaters require a certain amount of airflow around them, and there are certain legal building and safety things, so I'm not sure screening or planting in front of something like that is easily done, or the screen might have to be so big that it would be more obtrusive than the object itself. But that's up to you. You can, if you get concurrence from your colleagues, we'll figure out how to screen it.
Or we can make that a recommendation, Jay, not a condition.
I concur.
Yeah, we call those a consideration. So, but we need to get the group to agree to that. Considerations in terms of Mills Act contract, you do a consideration with the expectation that it's likely never to be done, but it puts it out there that you're on record thinking it's a good thing to do. The French doors, I believe I heard a majority say that it's okay to keep the French doors that are there rather than replace them. Is that true, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that just leaves us with the frieze. And at this point, it sounds like nobody wants to have the stucco restored, but Commissioner Vartanian is interested in having the upper and lower banding restored, and Commissioner Yurka is not interested in that, and I don't think Commissioners Morgan or Doom have weighed in.
Well, I like the idea of Commissioner Vartanian, but you know, it's not a restoration. It's just kind of a simulation of what used to be there. Well, I kind of, since we're not going to be restoring it, I just think it doesn't really need to be there to point out something that used to be there, because it's suggested all the way around the house. So.
And Commissioner Doom?
I agree with Commissioner Morgan. It'd be nice. I think it would be too obtrusive. Try and do that.
Okay, so we have a majority to leave the freeze as it stands. So, and then if we could get is there anyone who wants to support the consideration to screen the mechanical, the water heater, and the electrical? Again, I don't know exactly. We did that on one house where we put a metal chase over some of the conduit pipes, but it was a little more in your face than I think this situation is. But any support for that consideration?
That was in Spar Heights, I think, yes?
Exactly, yeah,
Yes.
the stone house.
Yeah.
I would go along with it as long as it's not too obtrusive, you know, without seeing it. You know, if the cure is worse than the original problem, then it's really not worth it. So, you know, I can't really, I guess I'll go with Commissioner Vartanian's idea, as long as the screening is bigger than the problem that is there. So without seeing it, you know, it's just maybe. I mean, that's a wishy-washy answer, but maybe.
Well, considerations are wishy-washy things, so.
So I'll give you as a consideration, yes.
I'll go with a consideration as well, but I do know from my own experience, having installed a tankless water heater, we were advised that nothing should be around it for almost 2 to 3 feet, which is why we had to put it where it was and tear down a little bush next to it. So it's a consideration, but it might be difficult to do depending on the land use, that there's a walkway or whatever's in front of it or patio, you have to plant or put a screen up around it. It's a consideration. I'll go with that too.
Okay, so we have 3 votes for the consideration, so that looks like something that there's support for. Commissioner Yurka also?
Yeah. That's fine with me.
Okay, so we have 2 conditions. 1 consideration will eliminate the freeze and eliminate the French door conditions, and it sounds like you're ready for a vote. Commissioner Doom?
So is there a vote to take this application under consideration as stated by Jay?
Yeah, well, what you'll be doing now is you'll be making a motion to recommend to City Council that the property be listed on the Glendale Register, and also recommend to City Council that the city enter into a Mills Act contract.
So I'd be happy to make the motion. I recommend that the HPC recommend to the City Council that the property at 305 East Randolph Street to be called the Newton House be listed on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources based on the findings identified in the staff report. I also recommend that the HPC recommend that the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract with the property owners for property tax savings, with the conditions noted above being replacement of the 4 wall lights with new fixtures of a design more appropriate to the overall appearance of the house, replacement of broken window glass where required as determined by planning staff, and the consideration of screening of some of the mechanical and electrical on the exterior of the house. Did I miss something?
I think you've got it. And putting on lawyer hat again, I'm going to check with the city attorney's office about a consideration for a contract. I don't think we've done that before, but I'll just double check if that's appropriate. If not, we'll just work with the Chappelles and work that out. So.
Thank you.
For a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Yurka seconds. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka,
Yes.
Commissioner Doom.
Yes.
Approved 4-0. So, Chappelle's, I'll be in touch about the city council schedule and what we need. It's going to be similar to this, but it'll probably run a little bit smoother, so. Okay.
Congratulations.
Okay, you guys can disconnect from WebEx. So.
And this was Capra's first vote. This was my first presiding over a house. It was so cool. My first house was the wedding cake house. That's kind of neat. And I would be remiss if I failed to mention that I thoroughly enjoyed reading Sean's letter. As one who reads essays for a living for AP classes, this was short, concise, and a pleasure and a humorous to read. So thank you, Mr. Purcell.
Does he get a 5?
Yes, he gets a 5 out of 5. Very good. And with that, I guess I'm able now to turn it over with my small shoes to fill in Commissioner Pagnotti.
Thank you very much for standing in, Mr. Doom. I was watching in the back, and for all of those of you concerned, at home, watching online, we could hear everybody great. Nick, you were clear. Everybody sounded great. So there we go. Okay, so we will move on to item number B, the proposed Belhurst Historic District. Presentation, please.
All right, so let me get back into screen sharing mode. Thanks, Eileen.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Okay, you can't see that, can you?
I can see it.
Yes, but you don't count.
Okay.
Here comes Xavier to the rescue once again. Now I can't escape from that.
Jay,
It's not escapable.
Because you gotta be in the screen. So in this screen, now hit escape.
Very.
So.
Yes, Catherine?
You ran it, right? That's what you want, right? So we're
I
going
just
to
wanted
do
to
is-
point out that with the previous
Right.
presentation, the PowerPoint was very small. I don't know if you guys had a problem. It was very hard for me to see. So if they could do it as presentation mode, where the slide actually takes up the whole screen, that would be a lot better.
We are doing that. I'm not sure why it's not.
No, it's okay.
Xavier will solve that too.
So this is what you want to run, right?
Yeah.
You already got it running, right?
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. Now go to full screen. Right there, slideshow.
Oh,
Right now, Kathy, can you see this full screen or is it small?
whoops.
It's okay, don't worry.
It's small. There's
Yes,
just a
so Xavier, do you
huge
know-
border
she's-
all around it.
No, that's it.
Yeah, we believe that GTV6 is transmitting this on GTV6 at full size. I'm not sure why in the WebEx screen. It could be something that you have control over possibly. Is there a maximize full screen on your WebEx?
Well, it is on, maximize full screen, not necessarily. I mean, I've read the file, so it's not that important, but
Okay.
I missed the pretty pictures of 305 East Randolph.
Is everyone else having this issue?
I'm having the same issue as well.
Okay, I don't know, even with the most expert advice here, I don't know that we can solve this.
And that's okay, just so you know, maybe for our next
Yeah, I think they
gathering, if we can get it figured out, that would be.
Well, this does seem like it might be, I can't speak to what's happening. Everything here is being done as it normally is, so we'll try to figure it out, and we apologize for this not being large enough. And sometimes you can sometimes maximize the view on your screen also. If you do Control+++, does that do anything? If you're on a PC, on a Mac, it would be Command plus maybe, or, okay, well, we'll muddle through this, we'll do our best. So I will be presenting the basics for this new historic district nomination, obviously for the Belhurst neighborhood. And here we are once again in North Glendale in the foothills of the Verdugos, where many of our historic districts live. And you can see the boundary that's proposed by the applicants and it basically is running.
Jay, I'm sorry. Is anyone else having a portion of their screen just blocked by something? It could be my computer.
No, it's us.
Yeah, I'm having the same
It is.
as well.
Yeah.
There's a gray
Here,
rectangle.
why don't
that's
I'm
covering
gonna
part
I'm
of-
gonna stop sharing and
Great,
try to come back to this. Okay, and so now you see yourselves, right? And now we'll share. We'll share again, and we'll share. Could this possibly? It's not doing this one. I have to share screen one. Xavier. This one. Okay, let's see. Okay. And how does that look?
Yes, that did it.
All right. All right. So now we have the boundary proposed for the Belhurst Historic District. And you should know that this nomination came to us in two parts. There was a group from the northern section of the area called Belhurst Hill Slope that proposed a nomination, and then a group from the southern portion that proposed the Belhurst Park nomination, recognizing that these areas have identical development histories and in general are, share everything. I worked with the applicants and asked them if they would be interested in combining the two nominations, which they graciously did. And so now we're looking at the proposed Belhurst Historic District, and I'll go back over the naming toward the end of the slideshow. But you can see that it's interesting if you look to the left, and there's this kind of random boundary that just goes down between houses on Ross and Lorraine and Randolph Streets. That's actually where Casa Verdugo begins. So this tract is this district will abut the Casa Verdugo district on the west, and then you'll notice on the east, there's that weird notch at the bottom. That's actually the notch that belongs to Ross Moines. So we're gonna have a historic district sandwich of Belhurst between Casa Verdugo and Ross Moines. Oops. Here's a map that we prepared years ago. We've known about this neighborhood as a potential district forever, pretty much since I started working here, so I'm happy that it's coming forward. You can see Ross Moines is in green on the left. The designated part of Ross Moines is the area above the Verdugo Wash. I think you can see so this little tail end of Ross Moines was not part of the Ross Moines Historic District. This area is. And then the Belhurst Park is the area in blue, extending all the way down to the Wash, to Ethel Street, just like Ross Moines extends to Ethel Street and the Wash. And then the Hill Slopes area is the, obviously the hillside area where the street patterns change and start following the contours. I hope everyone's familiar with Mr. Tom, who owned a huge amount of land in Glendale. He had orchards. He was one of the city fathers. Mike Morgan, I'm sure you will fill us in on any details you have.
They probably rode bikes together, the two of them.
Yeah. They rode, what are those, velocipede? No, that's a dinosaur. What are those giant bicycles with the big front wheel? That's what they rode.
Yes.
Anyways, here's Mr. Tom from 1893, and here's his second wife, Belle. And when we're talking about Belhurst, we know that he named his ranch Belhurst Ranch after his second wife, and then ultimately his sons began the subdivision of their father's former orchards and land holdings, but it wasn't his sons who actually did the development that we see today. I love this image that was submitted by the applicants. They kind of outlined some of the highlights of the boundary of their proposed district here. And this image is just great, showing Ross Moines on the right, obviously, but you just see the rigid grid pattern of the citrus trees and the olive trees that just completely filled this area, which were the big part of Tom's ranch, and he became a major grower and packer, and that's part of how he made his money. So some of these trees are actually still extant in the district, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that's one of the things that makes this neighborhood a little unique compared to some of our districts. In 1923, the Sons sold off their holdings to this portion of the ranch to the Walter H. Lamert Company. Lamert was a major developer up in the Bay Area from Oakland. I'm sure most of you know Lamert Park in South Los Angeles, but he also developed many other areas of Los Angeles, always with pretty high quality subdivisions, and he's definitely one of the most, I'd say, important developers of the 1920s in Los Angeles in general. And you can see from this arrow, he was also kind of a showman. He knew how to sell places. So this arrow, you see several versions of this on different developments that he had down in Lamert Park and some other neighborhoods. I don't think we ever had the arrow in Glendale, at least I've never seen it. But it gives an indication of how these guys were all trying to outdo each other. It was just like P.T. Barnum time, and everyone's trying to sell things as the most amazing development ever. And Lamert really marketed this area heavily. We'll look at a few of those advertisements in a second. The proposed boundary for the district does not incorporate the entire subdivision that the Lamert Company did. As I said, it went all the way down to Ethel Street and then went further up into the hills than is proposed. The applicants took off a big chunk of this area. They're proposing 306 houses, 306 properties for the district. And this is in keeping with how we've kind of arranged for other historic districts to be bounded in the past. It's actually, this neighborhood reminds me a lot of Brockmont Park, where there was more of a flatland portion and then a hillside portion. And when we were looking at Brockmont Park, we realized that the topology and the typographies of the buildings and the streetscapes changed as we got up into the hillside areas. There was definitely a change of character, particularly in how the houses relate to the street and to their surroundings. So I'll go back to the map they're proposing. The applicants are looking at basically just the lower part of the hill slopes area, which had a boundary on East Mountain Street. So if you look here, the boundary incorporates a large section of the north side of Mountain Street and then extends up into this kind of area that a lot of people always think is Ross Moyne. We had a lot of neighbors in this area saying, why aren't I in the Ross Moyne district? And I'd be like, well, because you're not in the Ross Moyne subdivision. Someday you'll be in a Belhurst historic district perhaps, and that day may come soon. So the northern boundary incorporates a good amount of the hill slopes area here and then along Mountain Street, and then the application basically stops at Stalker Street on the south. So here are a couple of advertisements for Belhurst Park, and we've seen these. One is for hill slopes and one is for the flatter Belhurst Park area. And the application contains a ton of these advertisements, and they're kind of fun to look at. They also obliquely mention the racial restrictions that were placed on properties in the area, and I'll talk about that in a minute in terms of what we hope to expect from a report that comes out of this district if you agree that we should move forward with this nomination. Here's an early photograph where you can still see the Ross Moyne sign up on the hill behind the development, and you see this Spanish-style house here, which is still standing today. At first I thought, well, that's weird. This house on the corner isn't here. And then I realized, well, there's quite a bit of distance from the street to this house, so this was just a vacant lot for some time before this house was built. I think this is 25, and this one might be, I can't remember if this is 29 or 30 or something like that. So anyways, the neighborhood has a very similar developmental history to Ross Moyne, but it also has differences in terms of the street layout. And that's another thing that I look forward to if we have a report done for this area, to get more information about the Lamert Company and how this neighborhood relates to other Lamert developments, and if they had any trademark development methods or any of their architectural restrictions, as well as their other covenants that may have been placed on the properties that we'd like to explore. The neighborhood is like Ross Moyne in terms of having a lot of period revival houses, but because it's also near Casa Verdugo, we have some earlier houses than we have in Ross Moines. So the nomination didn't capture that these are craftsman-style houses, calling them more colonial revival, but these actually qualify as craftsman houses, and I didn't mention that in the staff report, so I want to kind of amend that by saying we had the range of styles goes back to the craftsman era with just less than a handful of properties, I believe. And then we move into the period revival styles, and this is where we start looking a little more like some of our other hillside areas. We have Spanish colonial, the 2-story and the 1-story variant, similar to Ross Moines. On the bottom right, we have Mediterranean revival. And what's cool in Belhurst is that we also have a Pueblo Revival style house, which is a first in any of our historic districts. There's only one other Pueblo Revival that I know of in the city. There may be some others tucked away, but it's a pretty rare style in Glendale, so it'll be nice to have that within the protections of the historic district. We have Monterey Revival houses, including the 2 variants on the Monterey Revival, the more colonial version on the left, and then the more Spanish style on the right. And then continuing through this kind of encyclopedia of period revival styles, we've got Tudor houses, again, the larger, grander Tudor on the top left, a more modest Tudor on the top right. We have a few French eclectic or French revival houses in the neighborhoods that we see on the left, and then a few colonial revival houses like on the right. And the district period of significance extends into the late 30s and into the post-war era. So we have examples of minimal traditional. These photos didn't come out so well, but the top left is a minimal traditional. Top right is a ranch-style house. We don't have as many of these here as for example, in Brockmont Park, where we have a lot of ranch houses. And so that'll be another thing for the study to be looking at, how does this compare to some of our other neighborhoods? Are there kind of subtle aspects of the story of Glendale's development that we can tell by looking at those patterns? We have a few, modern houses, modern houses, like at the bottom right. And then we have a house on the left that's a really interesting kind of hybrid of streamlined modern with some Spanish touches. That is a really kind of fascinating house. I really enjoy looking at this one. The application is also very good about looking at street features, because as we've learned from our other historic districts, it's not all about the individual properties. It's about the feel of the street, the feel of the neighborhood. Street trees play a huge part in that. So we have a few streets that are lined with Canary Island palms or camphor trees. We also have the distinctive lampposts that are shared by Ross Moines. I believe those were developed for Ross Moines based on this little article that we see on the right with the G for Glendale. I'm not positive if we know that full history, so that could be something else that could be explored in a historic survey report. And then there was also an interest on the part of the applicants in the concrete stamps in the curbs and sidewalks, which is always fun to see, and some of them actually have dates on them. And Bates and Borland were a major company, and it appears that they were the company that worked with the Lemert Company regularly. And so I believe they did the earliest kind of concrete work. What's cool is this article that the applicants included, where we see Mr. E.W. Tuttle here, who was making sure that whenever possible, the existing citrus, and they mentioned citrus here, maybe it's also true of the olive trees, but they made an attempt to protect as many of these as they could. When you go back to that picture with the grid of trees, you realize that, thousands of trees probably were lost, and it's only a token that were retained. But one thing I would hope that the survey team would look at is, can we see any extant trees that possibly could be dating back to this early period? Because if those are mentioned in the individual survey reports for each property, they then become protected as part of the historic district. Now, citrus trees don't have a huge lifespan, so some of these are probably well past their expected life. So I don't know what we would do in terms of I don't know that we could require replacement with the same species, but the idea would be to maintain these as long as possible and kind of celebrate their connection to the early ranch heritage and Glendale's early agricultural heritage. So to kind of wrap up with the technical aspects of what we look for in historic districts for them to be eligible, and I should step back and remind the commission that On this hearing, and I think everyone knows, but on this hearing, we're basically looking at the application to see if it has enough information to suggest that this might be a historic district. And if that's the case, then you would be authorizing the applicants to issue a petition among the residents of the neighborhood and the property owners in the neighborhood, asking the city to conduct a historic resource survey. So the threshold tonight is relatively low. You're basically just saying, does it look like we have enough information to move forward, which staff believes that we do. And then if so, the applicants would begin the process of seeing if their neighbors support not a historic district, but just the study of whether or not there's a historic district, trying to prove whether the application is valid or is accurate in its assessment that this is a district. So going back to the name, I mentioned that staff believes that Belhurst is the appropriate name, and I believe the applicants are kind of on board with that. The application proposes a period of significance from 1923 to 1964. That is probably appropriate. It's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit compared to some of our other districts in terms of the end date. It may be trying to capture some of those modern houses, and I would leave it up to the consultant to kind of assess that, because we wouldn't grab those modern houses if there was a gap from 1956 to 1963, and then all of a sudden in 1964 we have some new houses. But if there's a continuum of constant development infilling the neighborhood, it would probably be more appropriate to keep the end date. But we've always been very open to extended multi-decade timeframes for our historic districts, because that truly is the way that we can capture the stories that these neighborhoods tell. The historic district ordinance requires that 60% of the properties in a district be contributors. We haven't done any kind of assessment of that, but I've driven the entire neighborhood. I've looked at it carefully, thinking about contributors. It looks like we're going to be over 60% if this district is moved forward. Okay, I thought I heard a question. The only question mark that I wanted to raise with the commission, and this is something that doesn't have to be decided tonight, it could just, if you agree that it's something worth looking at, we could present it to a consultant, assuming the petitions come back and we move into that phase. The applicants are proposing a southern boundary along Stalker that includes the houses on the south side of Stalker. And I have to confess that I may be responsible for this, at least partly because I said in general, we like historic district boundaries to run down rear property lines so that houses that face each other on each side of a block can have that dialogue and not have a historic district boundary line that runs up the middle of a street. In this case, however, I would recommend that the boundary do run down the middle of Stalker Street, largely because these houses face their neighbors across the street, and the condition that we see inside the red boundaries, the same as below the boundary. And really, it's the side facades of these houses along Stalker that are facing into the district. I think the applicants understand this and would be okay with it. And like I said, no decision needs to be made. But if you wanted to share any guidance, we could share any thoughts on this issue or any other with the consultant. And then we have 7, 8. We have 8 criteria. Nope, nine. We have 9 criteria for designation of, I'm trying to count like letters, like, okay, G is, so we go to I, which is the 9th letter, because my name is J, and I know that's the 10th letter. So we have these 9 criteria. It looks like we are going to meet, I believe 4 of those at this point. And again, this is not a final answer. This is something that the consultant would come back and say after they do their full study of the neighborhood, which criteria they believe this meets. So we believe that it meets criterion A, that it reflects special elements of the city's cultural, social, economic, engineering, architectural, or natural history. This is a very common one that most of our districts meet. It appears to meet criterion B, which not all districts do, because it's definitely highly connected with Walter H. Lamert and the Lamert Company and their role in the development in Glendale. It appears to meet criterion C because it embodies distinctive characteristics of various styles, various types of houses, and Doesn't really show us much about indigenous materials. Further up the hill, we do see a lot of river rock used, but that doesn't extend into the district so much, I don't think. So we have criterion C. We have criterion D. It does not appear to be the work of a notable builder, designer, or architect because the Lemert Company only subdivided. They didn't actually build the houses. Based on the information we have, if that were to change through the research in the report, that's the kind of criterion that might flip in the other direction if we had that information. It doesn't appear to meet criterion E. It doesn't have a unique location, and it's not a view or a vista representing an established familiar visual feature of its neighborhood. It doesn't appear to meet criterion F, which focuses on significant structural or architectural achievements. It does embody a collection of elements of architectural design, but those don't themselves have any significant meaning beyond that. And most of our districts haven't met criterion F. Criterion G, it reflects geographical patterns associated with different eras of settlement. This is one of our suburban developments that really did rely on car usage rather than streetcar usage, although there could have been. It wasn't super, super far from Brand Boulevard and the red car, but it's also not what we would call a streetcar neighborhood necessarily, unless Commissioner Morgan sees it differently, or anyone else. It appears to meet criterion H because it does convey a sense of historic and architectural cohesiveness, which is practically the definition of a historic district. So it does meet H, and it has not been designated as a historic district on the National Register or the California Register. Those would automatically be considered eligible for the Glendale Register if we had those. So that is my presentation on this district. So I will entertain questions, and then we could open up the public hearing.
Sounds good. Any questions from the commissioners?
Commissioner Doom?
I'm not seeing anybody on my screen. Maybe you need to unshare.
Yes, we'll unshare.
Thank you, sir.
And there you go.
Did you have a question, Mr. Doom?
Yes, I did. Reading through the history of the report, why is the year 1923 the first year, not anything earlier?
It's generally the year that the subdivision occurs, and that's often the year that houses start being built. Maybe not instantly, but it's usually based on most of our neighborhoods are based on subdivision start years. I believe that's the case with Ross Moyne.
Not when the original property or ranch was there, but when it was starting to being subdivided.
No, because there's nothing left of the original ranch. When we have a situation like Art Even Highlands, that house was owned by the person who subdivided the land. So the house Art even though it predates most of the houses in the district, is part of the period of significance. But in the case of Brockmont Park, the Brockman house, let me see if I remember this correctly, I believe is not part of the period of significance, though it is a contributor. That I'm not going to step in there because I can't remember exactly. But John Brockman didn't subdivide the land. He just happened to own it, and then his family subdivided it after he died. So there's not that personal connection.
Okay, that's all. I was just wondering. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I did have a question because the Tom family, they did this. I don't know if you can see it or it's going to disappear or stuff. But
You've got your weird background.
You have to turn off your virtual background.
We're going to have to see inside your house.
Anyway, so it's the Tom family in 1913, March of 1913, they are subdividing Belhurst. So I don't know how much they did. And the problem was right after 1913, the war starts and not a lot of subdivisions were going on in Glendale till after the war. So.
Yeah, I think that's in the application that the Sons started the subdivision. But as far as I know, there's no extent, there are no houses definitely from that earlier period, and in terms of street patterns or anything else, I don't think we have anything.
Okay.
But again, that could be something the research team looks at more closely.
That would be interesting.
Anything else, ladies? Any questions? No? Okay. So I would like to open the public hearing. It's my understanding the 3 applicants are on the line, right? There's 3 people that signed the application. Is that correct, Jay?
We have more than that because some of them have phoned in, but they're...
So what I was thinking is you initially said 10 minutes for the people that signed the application.
Right, exactly,
So I'd like to start with those
people
three.
on video.
So Jay is going to pull up those three people, right? Wink, wink.
Oh, Chris, you're hilarious.
We're going to get our tech guy out here. I know that the three of you know who you are.
Yeah,
so
I
if
think
you don't
they
mind,
have to share their cameras again.
some of them are called in. One second, guys.
Okay, so how do I bring
So
them? Now, Beth
those of you that have
Beth
called in to
just came
speak,
in.
you don't have to share your camera if you don't want to.
Right, but we have a few other people on camera, like Kathleen is has a camera.
Oh, I see.
But-
And then once they talk and unmute themselves, they'll come active.
Oh, okay, so
So if we could have the three
yeah, if the
people who-
first speaker can unmute and
Yeah.
go on video, and then we'll be ready to go. And you guys can just police yourselves in terms of the order you go in.
So perhaps we should have asked you guys to decide this sooner, but of the three people
I
that
think they did
signed,
before.
they did decide who's going to go
believe so,
first.
yeah.
Okay, so whomever's going to go first of the applicant signers, please go ahead and start. Looks like Kathleen has unmuted and she's going to start speaking. So in total, I'd like to give the three of you a total of 10 minutes, so about 3 minutes each. So go ahead, Kathleen, you have the floor.
Hi, I actually think John Sims is going to start. He was just frozen for a moment, but I think he's back. So, John, can you?
Yes. Yes, do you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, John.
Great. Hello, how are you?
Great. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us. So my name is John Schwab. Yeah, so my name is John Schwab Sims, and my husband and I moved to Glendale about 9 years ago. And what brought us to Belhurst was the character of the housing stock, tree-lined streets, and the quaintness of the period street lamps. All of these together really does give the neighborhood a sense of history and cohesion, which we find very appealing. And we're actually not the only Belhurst residents that feel this way. When we actually canvassed to gauge interest in potential historic district status for Belhurst, we were just amazed by the number of our neighbors who knew and told us the history of their homes. Several of them even invited us in for a tour just because they were just so excited to talk about their house. Belhurst is a special place, and going through the canvassing process really did bring the neighborhood closer together. One surprising thing that I did learn about the neighborhood is that it was developed by Walter H. Leimert, who was an accomplished early 20th century developer, and Belhurst was his first project in Southern California. As Jay said, he did go on to develop other high-end developments in South and West LA, and his efforts did help fuel population growth that happened during this time in Southern California history. Belhurst has a number of architectural styles that were prevalent in the 20s, including Spanish colonial, English Tudor, and French-inspired styles. When we did an inventory of the neighborhood, about 3/4 of the houses in Belhurst were Spanish and Tudor. And these styles have always appealed to me in that they're truly timeless in their design and lends an air of quality and craftsmanship to the homes. They also exude a sense of history, which imparts itself into the neighborhood as well. So it's important, in my opinion, that we protect this aesthetic in Belhurst, as it's not only a very important place for residents, it's also an important chapter it's also in a very important chapter in the history of Glendale as well. So that's all that I wanted to say. So I believe, Kathy, you're up next.
Can you hear me? I've started. Oh,
We can hear you. Yeah, there you are.
We hear you.
good. I wasn't sure that it was working. Thanks all for hearing us tonight. We really appreciate it. So here's my spiel. When entering Belhurst from the city, one feels the gradual incline of the foothills. Everything begins to green up as the mature tree canopy envelops the streets of the quaint and largely intact vintage homes. When I first drove down East Mountain Street where I live, I was taken by the same feeling I've had in places where the proximity of great natural beauty merged with well-designed original neighborhoods, places like Laguna Beach or Santa Barbara. That feeling was the sense that I was heading somewhere great. A wonderful atmosphere permeates Belhurst every day. The tall Canary Island pine trees on Mountain Street, along with the many camphor and magnolia trees of the north and southbound streets, create a park-like bridge setting, bridging the city to the Verdugo Mountains. The residents of Belhurst are not alone in enjoying this place, but daily hundreds of people from other parts of Glendale come to bicycle or walk the sidewalks lined with a mix of lovely and sometimes spectacular examples of Spanish, French, and English Revival homes. One can glimpse the olive trees from the original Belhurst Ranch in yards throughout the neighborhood. Walkers travel past the classic green street lamps and view an extraordinary amount of stained and painted glass windows, artisan forged wrought iron, and fanciful arches sculpted into stucco. Belhurst is a treasure, a jewel box of early 20th century revival architectural development, created to lure East Coasters from their frigid climates to create a new workforce supplementing the film industry and the many other business concerns in the growing boon town. Transplants were enticed with visions of backyard culture among the citrus groves and sold on visions of romantic foreign locales where everything could grow and bloom all year long. Making Belhurst a historic district will help encourage the appreciation of architectural preservation, which has tremendous value in preserving great craftsmanship and valuable old materials. I urge you to support the preservation of this wonderful tract of homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I think we have one more of the applicants that would like to speak.
Hi,
Is that right?
I'm Chris Schwab Sims.
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm so excited to be speaking to you about our beautiful Belhurst Park. My husband and I moved here 9 years ago and continue to find new homes and details of interest in the neighborhood. The people that have and do live here love it and are just one part of what makes it so great. For example, Betty Thompson was an American actress who got her start in silent films and transitioned into talkies. She lived in her 1925 English Tudor revival home called Casa de mi Madre, meaning my mother's house, since she originally bought it for her mother. Betty lived here from 1940 until her death in 1974. This home is very unique with its steep roof as it wraps along the corner lot of Randolph and Jackson Street and is just down the street from 305 East Randolph that is up for nomination tonight, or just got approved for nomination. Then we have Nino Garby, who lived just around the corner and down mountain in a castle-like Spanish colonial revival home. Nino was an amazing illustrator who worked on major films for Disney, Lance, and Paramount Studios, and many more. This home is a wonderland in itself, perched up above Mountain Street like a castle treehouse. A few of us were lucky enough to tour this home a few years ago as it came on the market, and the new owners have been lovingly bringing it back to its original glory. Continue a few blocks down mountain, and we come across a true stunner that has been beautifully revived by its current proprietors. The builder, Angelo Basello Jr. and his wife built this majestic Spanish colonial revival home. The family had a big impression on the area with building, owning properties, and frequently appearing in the society pages. In 1977, MCA Records president Robert Siner and family moved in, regularly taking advantage of the speakeasy and pool with some of the greatest musical guests in attendance. This is just a handful of the homes and people that have graced Belhurst Park. This tradition continues as people from all over the world visit and fall in love with what we call our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you to the three applicant speakers. I believe we have two additional...
Beth, I think.
Yeah, two additional speakers from the public.
No. Well, Beth
So we had
is
four
one of the applicants
four
who's
applicants.
speaking, yeah.
Sorry, I thought we only had...
Maybe a couple of others coming. So
that are signing the...
we'll have
Okay.
to figure out.
Okay, well, then we'll just go down the list. Beth, you're up.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if my video is up on the screen. Let me
Not
know.
yet.
Nope.
Okay, eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my video is on, so I'll just go ahead. I'm Beth Marlis. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll start by saying that 6 years ago, we knew that we needed to move out of our mid-city Los Angeles neighborhood because change was happening fast. Once the chain link fences around the 1920s houses started to suddenly appear, the longtime neighbors, the neighborhood, they would confide in each other that they were worried, each knowing that the neighborhood that they loved would be forever lost with the wound of each demolished house. Like gentrified dominoes, historic homes fell at shocking speed, and the loss of what used to feel like a neighborhood with vintage housing stock and a tree canopy quickly turned into a mere collection of featureless streets with soulless modern McMansions. It was as if an evil game of Monopoly had been brought to life. In looking for a new place to live, Glendale beckoned us as an oasis of intact neighborhoods and historic districts. When we found our 1928 Spanish colonial revival house in Belhurst, we began to truly know the house and to appreciate the history of those who lived here before us. It's our great fortune to be its caretaker and to contribute to its story and contribute that story to a larger collection of hundreds of houses and to the hundreds of stories and shared history that are the fabric of our neighborhood. There's truly a sense of place and of a living history here, right among the authentic architecture and its welcoming streets. I ask you to approve the Belhurst Historic District, which will protect this character and will protect our history by engendering our neighborhood pride and strengthening our neighborhood's identity. Education about historic resources is essential, and the creation of this historic district will help to educate homeowners about how to best preserve and how to enhance their homes, as well as prevent the destruction of irreplaceable historic elements like original windows, doors, and arches, as well as give the city the ability to work with us as our partners in preservation. As a caretaker of this home, I have every intention to someday pass along my house and our historic neighborhood on to the next generation, one that will take pride and joy in the stories that it will continue to tell to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Can I see the participants list, Jay?
We have Carol Atarian.
Oh, great. You have a list. Carol, you're up.
Can you hear me?
We can.
It's really an honor and a privilege to be on this call. My name is Carol Atarian. I've been a resident of Glendale since 1980 and a resident of Belhurst Park since 1988. There's no question in my mind that my husband and I moved to Belhurst Park and stayed all these years because of the historical charm of the neighborhood, which captivated us then and still does. I walk in the neighborhood most every day, and I never stop admiring the homes and the trees. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the story of my home. We bought it from a famous boxer, Jimmy McLernan. He was a pro boxer in the 20s and 30s, a two-time welterweight world champion, and he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1991. After he retired from boxing, he ran an electrical goods store in Glendale, lived in our house, acted a little, and golfed with his buddies Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Fred Astaire. My point in telling this story is that each of these houses in our neighborhood has a story and a cast of characters. I want to just reiterate that the proposed district, as Jay said, comprises 306 houses in all, and the majority of them would be contributors. As Jay said, so I'm not going to go into each one, there are 8 architectural styles in the proposed Belhurst Park Historical District. There are 4 homes in the Belhurst Park proposed Belhurst Park Historical District, which can be found on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources today, which attest to the significance of the historical development of this neighborhood and the contributions of its designers and residents to the city of Glendale at large. They are the Gray Sherwood House at 1345 Cordova Drive, which is a 1928 Spanish colonial revival, the Anderson House at 1327 Cordova Drive, it's a 1927 Spanish colonial revival. And on this same fabulous 1300 block of Cordova, the Peterson House, which is at 1326 Cordova Drive, it is a 1928 Spanish colonial revival. And at 721 East Mountain Street, there's a 1926 French revival that we locals, which I think is everybody on the call, simply refer to as the Castle. I truly love this neighborhood, and to me, these homes are like giant sequoia trees. They're spectacular and can never be recreated or rebuilt if they're torn down or altered. So it is my hope, and this has been in the works for about 8 to 9 years. I want to really thank the people that are spearheading this, which is John and Curtis Schwab Sims and Beth and Kathy, that this unique and beautiful historical neighborhood will be preserved for future generations to live in and appreciate. And I really thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Carol. Next,
Thank
we
you.
have Jay. Who do we have next?
If Greg Ross is still with us?
Mr. Ross.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us about this. My name is Greg Ross, and my partner and I were actually born and raised in Glendale, and we moved away in the 90s, but have recently come back in the last 6 years to resettle in Belhurst Park area. And I was actually going to speak on, some history of the proposed district, but Jay has kind of covered everything I wanted to talk about. So I just wanted to, I will, in the interest of time, I will defer to the next speaker, but I did want to say that, after, or I should say that Belhurst Park District, like other areas, historic areas in Glendale, it's a really beautiful example of pre-World War II architecture and building. There's craftsmanship. The construction quality is amazing. After World War II, things started to change as far as how suburbs were conceptualized. So to keep in a neighborhood like this, such as the other historical districts would be in Glendale, would be wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks for coming back to Glendale. We're glad to have you. Next.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I think that might be it, unless
I think
someone wants to speak up.
There might have been one more. John?
I can be brief. Yeah, John Shunning.
John? Yes, there was John Shunning.
Thank you.
Yes. Go ahead, John. Thank you for waiting.
All righty. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us on and giving us the chance to talk today. I am Greg's husband, and as he mentioned, we recently moved back to Glendale after about 25 years away. And when we saw sort of the beauty of Belhurst and a house was available in this neighborhood, it was an easy decision for us to move in. But what I wanted to talk about really briefly is, and this has to do with not only Belhurst Historic District in particular, but in historic districts in general. And that is the ecological and environmental benefits of preserving our existing homes, our existing neighborhoods, as opposed to demolition of the homes. And, briefly, I want to focus on two areas. I mean, the first one is the environmental impact that comes from the destruction of the original building materials. And the second is the impact on the natural environment that surrounds the demolition site. So regarding building materials, well, we all know that these homes have been around here for many, many years. They're full of lead paint. Lead paint was banned in 1978 in California.
So our houses are full of them. Greg and I probably single-handedly removed about 9 decades of lead paint around 16 window casements in our house. We did that, of course, with proper abatement procedures and whatnot. But there is lead paint here. There's also asbestos, which also, of course, is on all of our heating vents. It's sometimes in the plaster. It's sometimes in the roofing material. So both of these elements, lead paint, asbestos, they're harmless as long as they're not disturbed. They're kept intact. But once you have a demolition of a house come in, all these lead paint dust and asbestos elements are, kicked up into the air. And even though some people will do abatement programs, especially with asbestos, a lot of people do not do that with lead paint. So it becomes an environmental hazard to the surrounding area, especially if there's, children in the area. Lead dust is especially harmful to them at a young age. So that's one big problem with the destruction of existing homes. The other one is the impact of the natural environment surrounding the demolition site. So I think we can all agree that, when a house is demolished, the house that replaces it, the newly built house, it's not going to be smaller. It's always going to be bigger. Once in a while, it'll be the same square footage, but it's always going to have a larger footprint. There's this obsession with square footage I think, we see everywhere. And so the house will have a larger footprint. What does this mean? Well, to make room for this larger house, people are uprooting trees. They're getting rid of lawns. Landscaping's been removed. This happened to my dad's house, which I sold about 7 years ago on Western Avenue near Grand Park, not in a historic district, so there were no protections. So in addition to the 7 trees that were removed from my dad's house, which shaded the neighbors on both sides, the lawn was removed, the landscaping demolished, and still to this day, it pretty much sits as kind of a dirt patch. So there's that, and there's also the fact that a heavier footprint means a larger foundation, it means a larger hardscape, so there's less exposed soil to absorb the rainfall, and so we potentially have more problems with flooding and with runoff, and that sort of thing, which seems to become more and more of a problem as our climate changes. So my hope is that the designation of Belhurst Historic District will help to, sort of mitigate the environmental and ecological impact of unrestrained demolition of our historic structures. So by limiting the footprint and scope of the new structures, historic district designation, I think will help to ensure that the neighborhood remains green, with landscaping, nice tree canopies, proper rainwater drainage. But I also think it'll ensure that, our neighborhoods will not be, unnecessarily subjected to the harmful effects that come from demolition of structures, that contain toxic substances and whatnot.
I think we understand where you're going with that, John. We understand where you're going with that, John. Sorry to cut you off. We did sort of have a 3-minute limit on our speakers. So, do you mind if we cut you off there?
Absolutely. That was the last sentence anyway.
Awesome. Terrific. Well, thank you very much for your comments. Do we have anybody else, Jay?
I don't believe so, unless we hear from someone else. This proves that we in Glendale are generous with our speakers up to a point. So thank you, John, and everyone else.
I am going to close the public hearing. We seem to have lost Commissioner Vartanian. I'm assuming she's still... There she is. Okay. All right. So at this point, I would like to open this up to discussion among our commissioners. Would anyone like to begin? Looks like Mr. Doom would like to begin. Thank you, sir.
I lean in.
Great.
And play some skills with this.
What is that?
You can hear that.
Leonard Skinner. Couldn't quite hear it.
I love reading that report about Leonard Skinner being one of our guests in our houses. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
I would approve the whole district for just that one reason.
Right, and of course, Leonard Skinner was named after a teacher, so you must especially like that.
I'm glad you know that, yes. And I wish to thank all the speakers for your great attention to this matter and dedication to history. And thank you for speaking. And to Commissioner Craignotti for the most polite cutoff I've ever seen.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments, Commissioner Doom. Next, Mr. Morgan, you look unmuted and ready to speak.
I am unmuted and ready to speak.
Great.
I wanted to say that Belhurst will make it it's a piece of the puzzle that is Glendale. And I just want to say this is a great report. And any report that has the Glendale Montrose 22, their freight engine in it, is a great report. But I'd really like to have this Vartanian, who did Rossmoyne and put it all together, knows how hard it is to herd all these cats and get them into a historic district. And she did a wonderful job, and you can see it with Rossmoyne. And I'm sure that Belhurst be just as nice as the one she's created in Rossmoyne. So I like the report. I'm all for another historic district. I have loved Belhurst. I have plenty of pictures of all of the ads that they did when I was doing stuff on the different areas of Glendale that had been just subdivided. So I will just say that it's a great report, and I will leave it at that and let it go on to Ms. Vartanian. And
thank you, Mike.
Her reminiscence of what it's like to put a historic district together.
Thank you, Mike. Lorna, your turn. I think you have to unmute.
Sorry about that. Let me get my mouse moving. Yeah, no. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan, for that. I am so pleased to have this historic district come forth. I want to thank the applicants for your amazing application. I want to thank everyone who spoke today for your passion, because I know all of you are so passionate about this. And we've been looking forward to this. It's going to be a very challenging job, especially during COVID. But you know what? I know you guys will get it worked out. I also just wanted to mention that Jay, you brought up the concrete stamps, and there's nothing I love to do more than to walk through the neighborhood and look down and see a Nibley Investment Company stamp, and then a couple of houses down, I'll see the Bates and Borland stamp, and you just sort of know where one subdivision ends and the next one starts.
Nothing.
So, sorry?
He said nothing? Pleases you more?
It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool.
It is very cool. We're just teasing you. Ms. Yurka.
I know you
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Vartanian. I didn't mean to cut you off. Are you finished?
No, that's okay. And then Jay, I mean, I think, I don't know if you need, commentary from us. I do agree with the name Belhurst. I think that completely makes sense. I think we were going to maybe leave it up to the consultant, but I think it also makes sense to draw the line down the middle of Stalker Street and, not have, there may be a couple of houses on Stalker that face, but I don't know how many. So that makes sense. What else did we have? Other than that, I'm thrilled, and I fully support the applicants and the proponents moving forward with the next step to circulate a survey to request a historic resources survey by the consultants.
Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you.
Ms. Yurka, do you have anything to say on the matter?
I do.
Great.
Yes. So I'm very happy to see this application before the Historic Preservation Commission. Like Lorna, I also spearheaded a historic district, and I remember how exciting it was to finally get it to the commission and to begin the work, which was work, but it was also a pleasure of beginning, really feeling like I was moving forward with the process. I definitely support the nomination. I appreciate that. I appreciate Jay's work on the staff report and the kind of details that he included for the consultants to consider. I'm happy to see landscaping considered, as well as the role of covenants, and to think about this subdivision in relation to some of Lamert's other work, because that is a really distinctive feature of it. In terms of Stalker, I know that it looks very jagged and ragged on a map to see this kind of, irregular border, but I think it makes a lot of sense when looking at it from the street. So my own preference would be to include both sides of Stalker, but perhaps this is something for the consultant to consider. I did want to include one other aspect regarding the survey and the instructions, the kind of parameters given to the consultant, and that is that I really like for them to consider not only contributors, but also to identify properties that are individually eligible for the Glendale Register. It is no more work to do that. This is going to be, a from the public view survey, just as it was in the South Glendale Historic Resources Survey. I think given the plans for an east-west Glendale Historic Resources Survey that we hope will be part of the community plan, this would mean that the consultant would not need to redo this area. It would be done if it's within, I guess, the next 5 years. So I would really like to see that happen. I did notice, Jay, that the house that you showed on the screen as being one of your favorites, the house at the corner of Mountain and Everett, has recently been altered without permits in a way that I personally find extraordinarily distressing. It's one of my favorite houses in Glendale. So I am very excited to see that if the commission goes ahead and votes for the district, that it will enjoy protections as a pending district. And, so hopefully we will get a lid on all of this work. So anyway, thank you for bringing this forward.
And based on, if it sounds like we're going to get a positive vote tonight, and this means we do put holds on all the properties as quickly as we can after tonight's hearing. If you could talk to me offline about that property, because we are working on that right now, and I wasn't familiar that work had occurred. I know work has been discussed and proposed, but I didn't know anything was ongoing. So I'd like to, but we can't talk about that right now. So just try to reach me on Monday would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Yurka. Jay, I have a question about one of the things she talked about with regard to the survey, about the surveyors identifying potential contributors, potential register properties. What is the extent of that investigation? Like, would that just simply be properties that on their own, because there's so many different criteria that qualifies a property for historic designation. So is that the limits of their investigation just limited to things that would qualify from an architectural standpoint? They won't do something like try to learn the history of a house, of who owned it and all that. It would be kind of it would be a surface level investigation.
It is a different kind of survey. We have some information in the staff report or in the application. For example, the actress Betty Compson lived in this area. I wasn't super familiar with her, but looking at her career and everything, there seems to be a story there, definitely. Since this issue's been raised before, and I think it's been brought up at HPC as well as just on private discussions, I've spoken with 2 consultants who do kind of major projects all around the LA area, and they both say that the standard historic district survey that they do for not just Glendale but for other municipalities does not identify individual properties, and that a historic district survey is a different animal than a windshield survey like we do for South Glendale or other types of surveys. And they said the cost would be increased because they wouldn't just do an architectural. There's no, the problem, and I've mentioned this earlier or in previous discussions, we had, based on a requirement from the state, we were forced to identify individually eligible properties in the original Cumberland Heights survey back in 2004. Many of those determinations were all I can say is not good, not up to the standards of what we expect to see on the register now. Led to some early nominations that probably wouldn't have passed muster today, but they did at that point. So that, the commission changes over time and standards may fluctuate. But in general, just the standard practice of the consultant community in Los Angeles and probably the broader California area is that you don't mix those. They're two different surveys. If City Council was interested in doing a survey to research the background history of each property, that's how we would do a real survey where we could learn through the survey that something is or is not eligible for the register. But I completely understand Commissioner Yurka's point that we do identify through windshield surveys buildings that are potentially eligible for the Glendale Register. The problem we've had is if that level of detail, just like, oh, that's a pretty architectural specimen, let's give it a 5B instead of a 5D, which is the difference between a district property and one that's an individual and a district property. It might give people the false impression that we've already studied this through this historic district survey and that they're going to be eligible rather than, they could nominate and see what happens. And I also understand that's true of if we did just identify them architecturally. Based on my discussion with the consultants, I would advocate not to do this. But if City Council does want to do it or does want to pay more for a survey to get kind of a more comprehensive survey of the area done, that would be a council decision for the funding of this.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Yurka.
Sorry, yes, I would like to respond to that. So when the Neo Drive Historic District survey was prepared, ARG went ahead and identified properties that they thought were individually eligible. There is absolutely no requirement that they must delve into the research of the house to make a finding of potential eligibility for the Glendale Register. Remember, what you get out of the survey is a 5S3, appears eligible for the Glendale Register. That's true. That was true in the South Glendale Historic District survey. People may see that, see their the status of their property and assume that it must be automatically eligible. That's not true. And it wouldn't be true in a historic district survey. I asked ARG whether they had found properties eligible. They told me yes. They told me that they were told to remove that designation by staff because it was not considered part of the scope of work. The only thing that would cost extra is if we're expecting them to do the extra labor of digging into the records, the architect records, the records of people who live there. I just think this is an opportunity to have them look at the house, look at the architecture, and say whether based on the architecture they find this property eligible. That's largely what happened in South Glendale. They were supposed to do all of this research and it didn't really happen. So most of those findings were based purely on the architectural merit.
May I interject? Really because that is not true in South Glendale. A tremendous amount of research was done on hundreds of properties in South Glendale before determinations were made. And that I just have to put that out on the record. So
I closely reviewed that survey, and lots of the materials were missing. They were with Ancestry or Archive. They were not available for them to be reviewed. So some of that research was done, but by no means all of it.
Can you explain to me, Jay, the difference, and I think for people at home that might be watching that aren't super familiar with it, a 5S3 that she mentioned is a property that the survey company says could potentially be eligible for the register.
Exactly.
Now, there is a designation directly below that. What is the difference between the two designations when it comes to whether they're considered contributors or not but also what is that designation? What is the difference between those designations in terms of a property owner's rights to make modifications or whatnot to their house between those two?
We'll get wonky with the status codes. 5S3s, the status codes are established by the State Historic Preservation Office to identify properties at different levels as they have been surveyed in different methods of survey. 5S3 means a property has been identified, like you said, as potentially eligible for the local register, in our case, the Glendale Register. The level below that is a 6L, which is a property that is not eligible for listing. Therefore, it's not a historic resource under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, but there's enough character left, there's enough something there, so we tend to think of these as some of the craftsman houses that aren't individually significant, but still kind of have a little craftsman-y stuff. So the 6L status code gives us the opportunity through design review to try to keep that look alive as long as possible, but someone could demolish a 6L property. In terms of districts, we kind of shift over. Districts, we use the D letter, so a district, property that's been identified as a potential contributor to a district is given a 5D3 for district. Once the district is designated, that shifts to a 5D1, meaning it is a contributor in a designated historic district. In our districts, we give non-contributors a new code that we've established just for Glendale, which is a 7DNC, meaning a district non-contributor. The reason we give it the 7 code is because we aren't doing the research that Commissioner Yurka is asking to be done into the background history. So just on the surface, it doesn't look like it contributes to the character of the district, but we don't want to say it's not a historic resource, which a 6 code does. So we give it a 7 code, which is kind of a wishy-washy code that means it's up on the hill and we can't see it, or there were bushes that we couldn't see through,
or it's outside the period of significance.
We don't have enough information.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then a 5B code is a building or a house, well, any structure that is both an individually eligible or designated property and a district contributor or eligible as a contributor. That gets the 5B. And to the point of ARG's work in Neodora Drive, ARG is one of the consultants I checked with about what other cities do for historic district surveys. And I'm not personally objecting, and I hope Kathy understands this, to doing this. It just hasn't been our practice. And when we did it in the past on that one survey, it became a mess. And so I'm personally a little gun shy about doing it. But we could certainly, if the commission wants to give us direction to pursue that, we could bring that up to City Council as part of the commission's recommendation that staff investigate this kind of a little more officially than these kind of off-the-cuff conversations that I've had with some of my consulting colleagues out there.
Okay.
And
so can I have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
The 5D1 is a property that is considered a contributor in the district.
5D1 is a contributor.
Is a contributor.
Yeah,
The district's been
after we go
approved.
through the whole process and council says, yeah, we have a district.
That house is a contributor to the
So
district.
it was a 5D3 and then it shifts to the
became a
5D1. Yeah.
Is there a huge difference in your mind, based on the way they do the survey, between a 5D1 and a 5S3? 5S3?
Yes,
Okay.
because in a historic district, a contributor, we only look at the portions of the property that are visible from the street.
Okay.
If something's on the register or eligible for the register, we can look at the entire property.
So then if a 5S3 is placed on a property, does that mean that they've done a 360 thing, or they're just going based off what they see from
No,
the
it's
street?
just based on the street. That's why it says it appears eligible.
Okay.
So for example, if someone wants to do work on a 5S3, depending on the scale and the type of work, we'll try to guide them to do something that's appropriate. If they're doing something that we don't think is appropriate, we're going to take it through a higher level of environmental review.
And is that a different process than someone who's a house that's a 5D1?
No.
So would a 5S3 and a 5D1 be treated?
Wait, I'm sorry. No, there's the 360 for the Glendale Register and the
So if a
visibility.
property has a 5S3 on it that a survey company placed on it by only driving by doing the same type of research that they would do just to call it a 5D, the potential for a homeowner is quite different.
It is, and
the code makes a big difference.
What we would do on a 5S3, if someone wants to do something that we're not comfortable with, we would recommend, or depending on the level of environmental review, we could insist that they do a historic report, an assessment of the property, so that we get this assessment coming in from a consultant, and that will then help staff decide whether or not we can move forward with, say, a demolition or a significant alteration. Staff may or may not agree with that consultant's report. So, and the community may or may not disagree, or may not agree with that consultant's report. So that's where it becomes,
Yeah.
a little more complicated.
A 5D1 property owner wouldn't be put through the process of having to come up with a historic report, would they?
No, because we already, well, it depends. Again, it depends what they want to do. A 5D1 means it's a contributor, so they could put a significant addition on the back of the building if we can't see it from the street, or the commission could review a significant addition and determine whether or not it's appropriate to the district.
But we wouldn't necessarily specifically say you have to provide a historic survey of your own home. Like you said, it might be possible
for a 5D1. It's already a historic resource under CEQA.
Okay.
So we have that part covered.
And then you said the 5S3 label, does that, once the district is established, does that label can carry on? You said it switches to a
5D3 becomes a 5D1.
Yes.
A 5S3 becomes a 5S1 if it becomes listed on the Glendale Register.
Okay. So then I guess all of my questions before should have applied to the 5S1. So let's say the district is approved. Sorry, this is important to me, guys, and I'm sorry and I appreciate your patience. So let's say the district is approved and we have a 5S1 and a 5D1. I guess the question, the basic question is, how are those two properties dealt with? Are they dealt with differently when a property owner comes to the city to make an alteration to their property? Is a 5S1 treated differently than a 5D1?
Yes, because it's a contributor versus a Glendale Register property.
Now, the survey company is going to use the same surveying tactic to determine whether something is a 5D3 or a 5S3 that will ultimately become a 5D1 or a 5S1. They're going to use the same surveying process, right? It's going to be a front view only. They're going to look at the front of the house, and they're going to have two houses next to each other, and one they're going to say, well, okay, we think this is just a contributor to the district, but looking the same way at this next house, we think this could be an actual Glendale Register property, having no idea what's going on in the back of it or anything else related to it, right?
That's possible, yes.
Okay. So my position is that I am a little bit uncomfortable putting the higher level designation on a property that isn't surveyed any more than any other property, simply because perhaps it has all of its windows and still intact and it hasn't been majorly altered, whereas maybe a next door neighbor has an aluminum window or something like that. So they won't get the 5S3 designation, but they would get a 5D3 designation because they could be brought up to a better contributor level with a couple, right? A 5D3 can have an aluminum window or two, or is that a 6L?
No, a 5D3, a district contributor could have all of its windows replaced.
Right, and so then when they go to make modifications, we say, okay, look, you want to make modifications, well, now you got to fix the windows. Whereas a 5S3, it could be an entirely different thing. And the part that makes me uncomfortable is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the surveyors are going to go about the same, they're going to use the same level of evaluation on the two homes.
Yeah, it's a windshield survey. The difference is a historic district survey is specifically looking for contributors and non-contributors.
Yes.
That's the job of a historic district survey, as told to me by these consultants. And but as Kathy's saying, they could make a judgment call about things that are architecturally significant without knowing the history of the property, who lived there, what happened there, or what the back of the house looks like.
Yes, and so that's what makes me uncomfortable. I feel like if a surveyor finds a 5S3, finds a house that they think is 5S3, it certainly would qualify as a 5D3. Right, it would certainly work backwards that way. They could certainly find a 5S3 and just call it a contributor rather than historically eligible.
In general, you're right. If a property was built outside of the period of significance, it could still be individually eligible, but not a district contributor.
Okay, so I see where you're going with that. That was one of the other kind of sort of questions I had, but thank you. So I guess the point is, I think my position is that any survey that we do should be as least restrictive, because the 5D1 will still have protections. It will still have protections. A 5S1 will have more protections, I suppose. But we're talking about, in a historic district, we're talking about public right-of-way. And I would be concerned at adding on a layer to some homes and not other homes that might be a bit more restrictive than what most people would be expecting from a historic district survey. Most people that are going to be approached, I think, are expecting what we're telling them, which is your house may be deemed a contributor. I don't mean we, I mean people that are canvassing. Your house may be a contributor, and the point of historic districts is to protect the integrity of the neighborhood as you drive down the street from the public right-of-way and how things look. If suddenly someone is all for that, and then they find out that they've been deemed a 5S1 that becomes a 5S, or 5S3 that becomes a 5S1, and suddenly their whole world is slightly turned upside down. So my position is that that's just more than I think they were anticipating bargaining for. So my position is that, especially if it's going to cost more money, the last thing I think council would want to do is spend more money on the depth that survey would require. I think just a traditional district survey is what's appropriate. Our committee, we have so many different properties that we find eligible for so many different reasons. It seems a very arbitrary thing to simply drive down the street and point at a house and say, well, that certainly seems eligible for the Glendale Register. If it's a Spanish colonial revival, we have so many of those, I don't see that we would ever approve one simply on architectural style.
We have situations like 305 East Randolph where anyone driving by is going to say that's a no-brainer, that belongs on the Register.
I mean, it seems obvious.
I'm just thinking out loud now, and I think Kathy wanted to say something, but just based on where you were just going, if the commission wants to pursue this discussion and raise this as we move forward to council, now this won't get to council for a long time, but it could get to council in the interim.
Yeah.
There's an issue of parity, I think, in terms of equal protection and the expectations of property owners who've seen us go through this process over the last 7 historic districts without doing this, and then suddenly we shift gears and start doing it. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a problem or not, but again, my amateur legal head just says that's a question I want to ask the city attorneys to see if there's an issue there.
Catherine, you wanted to respond? Or I think you're muted.
Yeah, I did. I think the most important thing is that a survey be as accurate as possible. And, given that it's not arbitrary that someone drives around and looks at the exterior in the public right-of-way to determine whether that house may be, based on its architecture, eligible for a local register, that's what most surveys are. It seems to me that and I don't think we need to hide this from residents. I think we could let them know that, we are doing it's a historic resources survey. And the idea that you would look at a house that is obviously eligible for the Glendale Register and a contributor to a historic district and not give it a 5B, which appears eligible as a local historic resource and as a contributor, just seems inaccurate and misrepresentative to me. I also wanted to
it does privilege aesthetics over history. I believe if I were a homeowner in a district and I heard, okay, my house is a 5B, but my neighbor's isn't, I would say, well, your house isn't. A layperson might not understand that further research into the history of their house could reveal that it is actually eligible for the Glendale Register, where someone might look at the survey and say, now that's just the layperson's view, and we're in the weeds of technicality here, but
yeah. And I think that's part of the education. Can I just finish, Lorna? And then I did. I think we can explain what these things mean to people. But I also wanted to say, Chris, I understand that that if someone has a house that looks magnificent from the front and is a disaster in the back that renders it just ineligible, that you would be reluctant to force them to pay for a historic resources evaluation to prove that their house is not historic. My impression is that they could produce photos, or there could be a site visit, and Jay could just make the case that this house does not qualify because of all these alterations that are outside the public view. I just think, given that there's been work done to historic district contributors because they're only contributors, and that they're not really being evaluated as individually eligible, I just would like to see that protection actually in place if there are houses that obviously merit, and I totally get what you're saying, Jay, about the first Cumberland type survey. But, all I can imagine is that the review process for the survey wasn't what it is now. And that there were, I know that with the survey for Neo Drive, you said, ARG said this is a contributor. You said, no, this is not a contributor. So, it's not that the surveyor gets the sort of final say. It's part of a process. But I'm done talking about it.
Thank you, and you're right, the surveyor does not get the final say. The city does, of course. But I do believe working within the range of standard preservation practice is something to also consider.
Lorna?
I had one other thought, but
go ahead.
Yeah,
Jay.
I've lost it. So
Okay, Lorna, dear.
Thank God.
Thank you, because I'm almost losing mine. I just wanted to say, one, that I do think it is difficult enough educating residents of a potential historic district about the process and, knocking on doors and helping people who aren't already aware understand what it means and how it affects them. That's difficult enough. So to add another layer of trying to, address that your home might be more important than it might be just off a windshield survey is gonna, I think we're getting into some difficult territory there. But I did also want to, I think the suggestions you just made, Kathy, I did want to say that I think the burden of giving a home a higher designation is somewhat unfair to homeowners who may need to then go ahead, right, and commission a special historic resources report if they wanted to move forward with changes or whatever it is that they want to do. But if the staff could go out and look at the back of the house and see that it was just totally, we've got something completely different going on there, or it would not be, it would not rise to individual eligibility, I would feel more comfortable with that than just leaving owners with the burden of sorry, I'm distracted by my dog who's trying to get in the house because they've been locked out during this meeting. Pawing on the window in front of me.
I think he's saying wrap it up. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So Chris, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I think that is putting sort of an unexpected burden on homeowners, to have to go through an extra expense, I guess. But if there's, and this is probably a broader discussion, and I don't know what the appropriate arena is to have it in, if it's us or us in council, or us making recommendations to council. I do think this is a bigger discussion, but those are just my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Lauren.
And this is the time. I know we've had a long meeting, but this is a good time. It's a good time to have this discussion.
Good.
We will be going to council ultimately for funding of whatever survey we go to. So members of the commission could also discuss this with council members or testify at council, and the discussion could be raised during that point. The thing that I lost track of a second ago, I've raised this before. Glendale is, if not unique, extremely rare in the entire state of California to have citywide design review. Status codes have a very different impact on property owners in Glendale because every decision we make is subject to CEQA, and therefore, I just want to remind the commission that this, you've kind of, or at least a couple of you have been going in this direction. It does add something more than property owners are expecting in a standard historic district that I think people have come to understand how we do this in Glendale.
Yeah.
Not that can't change, but I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Can I make one? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lorna.
Did you want to? Okay, thank you. If I just did want to step back quickly and ask a question and make a comment about the proposed southern border of the district again. And Jay, did you ultimately say that we would leave that to the consultants, because I did want to say that the aesthetics of a jagged border did not inform my suggestion that we take on the middle of Clark Street.
Yeah,
and realistically, I mean, having been down this path, I do know that there are a few homes on Stalker, between those boundaries that face Stalker, but the rest of the homes do face the north-south streets. And so I don't know if it would be awkward to have a home in the district boundaries that actually has an address on a different street or does not, face into the district. So just a consideration.
Yeah, district boundaries can be jagged. If you guys ever remind me, I can show you a boundary of a district in Houston that is the most insane historic boundary I've ever seen.
Probably looks like a congressional district in one of our Midwestern
a lot of gerrymandering going on. But I do, I disagree with Commissioner Yurka because I've driven the street also, and I think from the street view going down the street that it is better to have the boundary. I'm also a little concerned, and again, this is just the legal thing that doesn't mean anything coming from me, but when we're telling people you're in a district or you're not in a district, it's easier to do that when you're talking about, facing houses on a street or at a clean boundary line. When you're telling someone that, hey, I'm the side of my house faces a district, but my next door neighbor is not regulated by the district in the way that I would be because the side of my house faces the district. To me, that raises kind of another concern, I guess.
Is it possible to ask those homeowners if they would want to be in it? Or is that...
Well, they're gonna have
right,
a say in this. And this can... It's written into our process that we can change boundaries through this up until your review of the final draft or the final report. So the boundary, we can look at a boundary right now as kind of in flux, as malleable, and ultimately,
great,
see where it goes.
Any other comments, fellow commissioners? No. Oh yes, Ms. Yurka.
Sorry, I am just going to make one last comment, and that's just part of my thinking about the survey including individually eligible properties is that there are properties that come up for sale, or when you see a fence around it or evidence that some work is going to begin, where neighbors, and this happens in our HOA, will contact the city and say, look, we believe that this is a historic resource. It's not the survey that makes it historic, it's the house. And in general, I believe it's good for property owners to know whether their house is historic or not. And this is an opportunity for them to learn this. Although I take Lorna's point about the complexity of making the case for the district, but I do feel I just want a citywide historic resources survey.
Yes, you do.
Where every property is evaluated. And in the absence of that, when we do these surveys, it seems like a good opportunity to let people really know, no, it's not just a contributor, it's a historic, individually eligible historic resource.
Okay, well, you brought up one of my favorite subjects, which is real estate sales. So I'm going to touch on that. I will tell you that as soon as it gets complicated for a homeowner to A, understand a designation, B, remember that designation 5 years later, C, articulate that designation to their buyer, it just becomes very complicated. So the more uniform the codes can be throughout the district, the better. So that one homeowner who is a 5D1, the homeowner that's next door that's a 5S1, that's a very complicated thing for a lot of people to, first of all, we have a hard time understanding what the difference is. So what would be easier, I think, for most homeowners is if the highest level we had was a 5D1, because then we could say, this home is a contributor to a historic district. That's a much easier thing for people to remember. It's much easier for homeowners to remember, people that live in the district to remember, than I'm in a historic district and there is a survey that says my house is potentially eligible for the historic resource designation. Those are two very different things. They mean two very different things for property owners, and it's already complicated enough for us to understand it, that to put that burden on our homeowners, I think would be unfair. I think every homeowner should understand that once their home is a contributor, they have every right to do further research on their home and perhaps try to become a historic resource themselves. But to put the designation on there already, like I keep saying, from a windshield survey, just doesn't feel appropriate. And from a disclosure standpoint, when you're talking about real estate sales, my homeowners that I represent, they have a hard enough time remembering the plumbing they fixed 5 years ago to then have to remember that their designation is different than their neighbor's designation, and then somehow articulate that to their buyer so their buyer understands it. It's just, I think that doesn't help your argument. Let's put it that way. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't help the argument of a real estate sale being somehow a benefit of having a 5S3 designation versus a 5D1. That actually makes it more burdensome, I think, for homeowners.
I think this is clearly a much bigger discussion.
It is. It is. Although Jay said now's an appropriate time to have it. I don't know how else we would have it unless it was agendized.
I mean,
Catherine?
Oh, no, go ahead, Lorna.
No, I was going to say, I don't know how deeply we want to get into a real estate discussion right now.
I'm happy to have it whenever.
I mean, the flip side of the coin is that it's from the perspective of those living within the boundaries of a district, it's often difficult enough right now to ensure when homes sell that the people, either the agents or the owners, as you said, even remember to make it clear, that this home is a contributor to a historic district. I mean, we find that that's really not happening as it is.
I don't think that that's true. I'm going to disagree with that statement. I don't think it may not be mentioned in marketing.
You don't operate that way. But clearly, I talk whenever there's an open house in my district. I go and talk to the agent, and I will say 9 times out of 10 they are not aware of what it is.
That's different than someone buying the house not being aware that it's in a district. Yes, there may be real estate agents that aren't aware of the historic district or decide not to use that as part of their marketing. But there is a specific question on the disclosure form that a seller fills out that specifically asks if the home is in any kind of a historic district. Homeowners generally know if they're in a district. They won't, I don't think, in most cases, know whether they're a 5D1 or a 5S1 and what the difference is, but most of the homeowners know that they're in a district, or they'll say, I think I am, let's look that up, and it usually gets put on the form. I haven't heard of any buyer, certainly not the properties that I sell, but I haven't heard of a buyer meeting a buyer later saying, I had no idea that my home was in a historic district.
It happens to me all the time because when we
Well, then they're probably not being honest and they didn't read the disclosure paperwork.
Can I finish?
Yeah, sure.
When we have new homeowners moving into the district, we visit them to welcome them to the neighborhood and let them know that they have purchased into a district. And again, 9 times out of 10, they are not aware of that.
Okay, so then that actually...
It's more pervasive, and this is a bigger, it's a bigger issue. It's a bigger discussion.
Well,
it's a real problem.
It kind of is, but it kind of speaks to my point. It is a seller's responsibility to disclose that they're in a historic district, not a real estate agent's responsibility. It is a homeowner's responsibility, and they are asked a specific question on the form. So if they read that question and they still don't know the answer and they still get it wrong and they don't disclose it to their buyer, do you think putting a 5S3 designation on their property is going to get properly disclosed to a buyer? If you're telling me that there's people selling those properties in districts that aren't even properly disclosing that they're in a district, it's the seller's responsibility to know that information. And if it's not being passed on, this the education needs to become much better, and it needs to be as simple as possible, so that adding of more layers and my neighbor's designation is different than my designation is only going to make that problem much worse.
I don't see it from the perspective of my neighbor. It's me against you. My designation
that's not what I said.
And yours. I was just speaking to the fact or the position or the point that when a current property owner suddenly has that higher designation and they want to do some work on their home that might be the same work their next door neighbor wants to do, that we're putting the burden on them to have to pay for a special historic
agree. Yeah, totally.
resources survey individually on their home. And I'm just looking at that burden. Clearly at point of home sale, you would hope that designation would be communicated properly and the new owner would know that they might have a higher burden. But, the outcome of a resource survey that suddenly says you are eligible for individual designation places a different burden unless the city comes up with a way to mitigate that. And as, Kathy was suggesting, Commissioner Yurko was suggesting that, if staff can at least go out and do a preliminary review to see if there's something going on with the property that initially or automatically just disqualifies it.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this particular topic? Jay, what you're looking from us is a...
Tonight, we're just looking for your vote on whether the nomination appears to meet the basic criteria for potential designation as a district, and then also your authorization that the applicants can now begin the distribution of a petition through the neighborhood. And believe me, the petition issue is, as you can imagine, an interesting one in this moment in time. And we're working on that with our other historic districts that are in process. So it's actually a good time because we'll finally come to some resolution in terms of how they can, what the city can accept in terms of signatures and how this will work. Yeah. I'm sure it's all going to work out fine. I think some people are going, well, it's all going to work out. So.
Okay. So you're looking for two motions?
Things, yeah.
And they're motions?
One motion covering both.
One motion covering both.
They're not really exclusive. So.
Would someone like to make a motion? Lorna, you are unmuted, so I'm going to leave it to you.
So I would like to make a motion that the proposed district appears to meet the criteria of eligibility as a district. And I would like to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Authorize
that the proponents move forward with circulating a survey to request a historic resources survey.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Anyone like to unmute and second that?
I second.
Okay, we have a tie. Roll call, please.
Well, who's
we'll give it to
second?
Kathy.
I have to keep track.
We'll give
of
it to
this.
Kathy, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Kathy gets it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And now I do the roll call.
Yes, you do.
All right. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Doom.
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka.
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian.
Yes.
Commissioner Cargnati.
Yes, please.
5-0 to move this forward.
Great.
Congratulations to our
Yay, Belhurst. Way to go,
Belhurst
everybody.
peoples.
Moving on. Number 8, Community Development Department updates. A, update on Harrower Lab, senior housing project and affordable housing project at 900 East Broadway.
Okay, I'm going to be super quick with these. I'm not even going to show the slides since, God knows we can't deal with another JPLAT-driven technical problem.
Thank you.
The Harrower Lab project, I'm sorry, I'm screaming in the mic. The Harrower Lab project is going to come to HPC for design review next month on the 17th. You will also be doing advisory design review on the adjacent building across the alley, which is going to be, I'm sorry, did I say affordable? The Harrower project is going to be a senior housing project.
Right.
And then the larger project across the alley to the west is going to be an affordable housing project. The alley between the buildings will be vacated and turned into a public passageway. And both projects will kind of synergistically deal with that, although the passage will be the responsibility of the affordable project to the west. The good news is this is going to be a federal rehabilitation tax credit project. And the National Park Service has just given us the other day the preliminary determination that this property the Harrower Lab is eligible for the National Register, which we never really doubted, but now it's official, or it's preliminarily official, but I can't imagine it's not going to go forward. And that's the first step of qualifying for the tax credit. So that's a real enhancement for the development team
Good job.
That will be doing the project. I had nothing to do with it.
Good job to those who
The consultant and our housing division took care of all of this.
Excellent.
So I was a little involved, but so there's not much more to say on that. We can't really discuss it because it's coming to you as an agendized item next month.
Okay.
But just wanted to keep you posted.
Thank you. Item B,
Refresh my
update.
memory.
Update on historic district surveys, South Cumberland Heights.
Yes.
And Casa Verdugo.
Okay, so the surveys came in last month. So we have draft surveys for both the South Cumberland Heights and the Casa Verdugo district. I will give you a quick update on what the numerical findings were. Both districts, just to end the suspense, both districts appear to qualify as historic districts in Glendale. South Cumberland Heights contains 217 properties. 161 of those were determined to be contributors, which brings us to 74%, which is well above the 60% required. The Casa Verdugo district contains 112 properties. 75 of those are contributors on the survey. 67%, also above the 60% threshold. The survey team, the applicants in both cases proposed periods of significance, and the survey team in both cases expanded the period of significance. So there's a broader range of dates that they think are appropriate for both of these districts, which especially with Casa Verdugo, which we knew from the beginning, Casa Verdugo, even the applicants knew that there was some issues with some of the non-contributing properties. So I believe that we both have two solid potential districts there. In terms of process, we need to have a community meeting before this comes back to the Preservation Commission. We need to do that virtually, of course. That is turning into, we're going to make it work. I'm really hopeful we can have that happen in January. I was hoping for December. At this point, I doubt that. But we are actively working to kind of figure out how we're going to do the virtual meeting. We've done other departments have done a couple, so we're going to kind of follow their lead. That meeting specifically is to kind of debut the survey, which gives the property owners, any member of the public who's interested in this, the chance to look at the survey, and then also to review the DPR forms, which is important for the individual property owners to look at the DPR form for their place and tell us if there are any issues. So that's going to move forward. And
Can I ask a question about those?
Of course.
What are the due periods of significance?
For South Cumberland Heights, we start in 1922 and we go to 1960. For Casa Verdugo, we start in 1906 and we go to 1957.
Cool. Thank you.
And the fact that we're going to 1960 and then in Niodrara we went to 1962. So my concern when I wrote for Belhurst that I thought 1964 might be pushing things, it totally might not be. It really depends on when they do the analysis of the properties and if we see gaps or we don't see gaps, if there's a continuum of development or a jagged story. So we'll wait and see what the consultant says there.
Thanks. We'll go on to C.
Any other questions on?
Any other questions on the historic district update?
Yes, and then once we have the community meeting, it's pretty quick. Then we come back to HPC. You'll review any information that we get from the community. The consultant will make a presentation and we'll be able to revise the report based on feedback from both the community and from the commission. So you'll have a chance to review the full document, and I'll make sure that you get more than the standard week because it's going to be a longer thing than you normally are reviewing. And then if you vote to move it forward, then we do the second petition, which is where the community, the neighborhood actually, by signing the petition, votes on whether we should ask City Council to designate the district.
Great.
So that's good. And then the last one was...
update on historic district brochure.
Historic district brochure has been put on the back burner for a long time now. It's been officially put on the back burner as of several months ago. I believe it's close enough to being ready for its debut that it should be coming to HPC. I'm going to just say in the next 1 or 2 hearings, hopefully.
Great.
The brochure, I know there's some members of the community who are especially focused on getting this out there, and I know it's going to be helpful. I know it's going to be a nice thing to be able to hand to people. We're also going to be mailing it to the properties. That will have a half-life of I don't know how long before people forget where they put it or forget they ever saw it or pretend they never saw it. So it's not going to solve all of our problems, but I think it will be helpful. It's going to be a nice document to have for people. It looks pretty sharp, so it's really just a matter of fine-tuning it.
Great.
So I just want to give you an update because I know people in the neighborhoods are kind of relying on this, and I haven't been able to bring it out. So soon.
Okay. I have just one question for Jay. Excuse me.
I didn't realize it was a private question.
Yeah, so our next meeting will be December.
Sorry, we will be having. I just was asking if we were
you guys
having
could hear us, right?
No, that's fine.
Next meeting will be December.
I guess there's mics all over this place. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I was just curious what our next meeting was going to be.
Yeah, December 17th will be our next meeting.
Okay.
And that's where we'll. I don't know how much we'll have besides the 2 projects at the Harrower Lab. Maybe we'll have a brochure.
Oh,
maybe not.
Well, don't make any promises, Jay. Careful.
No, there's a lot going on, so we'll see what happens.
Okay. So, I wanted to give Catherine the second on that last item we moved because it's my understanding it's her birthday today.
Oh, that's
so I wanted to give her a little gift. So, from me to you,
Happy
I'm
birthday,
giving you the
Kathy.
second.
Exactly as I was hoping to spend it.
You were hoping to spend it. Yes. So, anyway, thank you very much for joining us on your birthday, Catherine.
Well, it looks like there's a meal coming your way.
There is a meal coming her way, and if you've noticed, there's been some champagne going her way as well.
No, sparkling cider.
So we all thought this was going to be a really quick meeting, but we've somehow made almost 8:30. So one of our records.
And we need to thank our tech team also. We always have GTV6 with us, but we also have with this whole remote thing, we have Xavier. And
Xavier, thank you.
Who else is out there?
Thank you.
He wants to get home to his family too. So on that note, we are adjourned. We will see you in December. Thank you, everybody.
8:19. Thank you.